Hello and welcome to this commentary for Dino Crisis. I will be continuing after the intro.
You have mail. The second report from Military Experiment Facility. Agent name, Tom.
I have successfully infiltrated under the guise of a researcher as planned. I have encountered no information regarding top-secret development of new type weapons. But I have discovered there is an unexpected individual at this facility. The man is Dr. Kirk, the leading authority of our nation's energy research. Dr. Kirk was alleged to have died in an accident during the course of an experiment 3 years ago. The reports were premature, and it appears that he is currently working as the head of a non-weapon project at this facility. The experiment is in the late stages of development. Regarding the staged accidental death, it appears that this country is somehow involved, recommending that necessary actions be taken immediately.
Refer to the data on Dr. Kirk. Operation instructions.
Approaching drop zone.
Feels like we've got a little turbulence.
Once you hit the ground, head straight to the designated convergence point. Got it?
Sorry I'm late.
It's time. Let's move out.
What about Cooper?
Forget him. Time's up.
Wait! Wait!
Okay, this is the first checkpoint. Playtime is officially over, kiddies. Something's wrong. The lights in the guardhouse are out.
Maybe this has been a wild night of partying for the guards. You know, a little song, a little dance.
Stay here, Junior. Leave the guards to me.
Hey, did you hear what he just called me?
Forget about it. Just let Gale handle this.
All right, it's clear. Okay, let's do this. I'll infiltrate the facility and occupy the control room on the first floor. I should have access to all the security systems from there. I'll contact you as soon as I've cleared the room.
Let me guess. This is some of your handiwork, right?
The brass is still warm. These guards were shooting at something very recently.
So who were they fighting?
This wasn't much of a fight. I don't think these guards hit anything before getting sliced and diced. Whatever they were shooting at came in through there, and ripped right through the steel fence.
Well, the hole is nice and clean. But I still say you could have done this.
Very funny. We still need to figure out what happened here. Continue to sweep the area.
Seven minutes. 7 minutes is all the time I have to play with you. So yeah, quite a lengthy intro for Dino Crisis here, even more so than the Resident Evil games that came out around this time, so 1 through 3 and Survivor especially. And one thing you'll notice, obviously, you know, both made by Capcom, is the survival horror was very much coined because of Resident Evil, but the games as they went on started veering a lot more actiony, especially with like number 3. Dino Crisis wanted to take it a bit more back to its root, so you'll find it's a lot more emphasis on atmosphere going forward.
Rick here. I'm in. The place is deserted though. I have a very bad feeling about this.
How's the progress going with that security system?
I don't know what's been going on here, but it looks like all the power in this facility is being cut.
Same here.
As long as that's the situation, there's not a lot I can do. Why don't you see if you can gain access to the backup generators on the ground level?
I'm on it. What are you doing here?
I caught the last part of your conversation.
By the way, I found a key.
Hand it over. Let's head outside.
Yeah, a much slower build-up than the Resident Evil games. I mean, obviously by 2, 3, and even to a lesser extent Survivor, we already knew there was a zombie apocalypse, so it kind of just dropped us right into it. But even the original Resident Evil, we were playing characters who were attacked by dogs one running into the mansion. So Dino Crisis takes a lot more time to really set the mood, to build up the atmosphere before anything goes wrong. If it wasn't us seeing Cooper getting eaten, we wouldn't even know there was a problem.
That's disgusting.
This guy's been eviscerated. Something tore his intestines straight out.
Look at those tooth marks. It had to be some sort of animal.
Okay, let's move on.
a little bit of an understatement to seeing a man bisected, but Regina is in the Special Forces, so I guess a certain level of dark gallows humor is to be expected. Though I do love just how blunt she is with her lines. So before moving on, I want to make sure you check the body. There is a medium medkit in there, and we don't know what we're going to need moving forward, so good to stock up while we can. I'm going to come to our first electrical puzzle. So this will be a recurring one where you have to move these breakers or conductors to match up with the color of the switch on the right. It comes up a few times, relatively easy to do. For this first one, if you are struggling, the correct coordination is right, middle, right. I know some of it's a little bit cliche, like the hearing of gunfights off in the distance, but at the time this came out, yeah, it's kind of tropey in movies. It didn't really happen in video games, and I just love some of the setup to this. So this is the basic enemy of Dino Crisis. The Raptor is a hell of a lot more dangerous than your traditional zombie, so I would highly recommend, considering you have nothing but a pistol right now, to just leg it out of there. You are going to get torn to shreds if you try to fight this one, so just don't even bother.
Good news! I got the control system back online. What's the situation over there?
It's Gale. I lost him.
So what's the bad news? Did you run into some guards?
You're not gonna believe this. He was attacked by some kind of dinosaur.
Now that's a good one. So, who was it? Barney?
This isn't a joke, you idiot. We were just attacked by a big-ass lizard.
For real? What's going on over there? Alright, head over to the control room and we'll sort out this whole situation.
You know, I never fully understood what he was saying at that point. It was like, oh, who was it? Like, almost like when you refer to a girl who has a boyfriend or something. It never made any sense to me. So despite only ever appearing in 2 games, or as far as I'm aware, 2 games, unless she's appeared in some Capcom versus Marvel spin-off that I'm completely unaware of, Regina seems to be quite a popular character, at least from the fan art and posts I've seen online of her. And I think part of the reason for that is not just because she did the cool dyed red hair before the whole anime craze kicked in, but also because she has maybe not the most believable reactions. It is, you know, PS1 game, it is still a bit, some of the voice acting's still a bit funny, but after the first raptor encounter, she seems very twitchy, on edge. She'll hear a noise, she'll instantly point to it, and okay, it's still not perfect, but compared to how bad they were in the first Resident Evil games, it's a big old step up.
What's our status?
This security system is a snap for me. Real amateur stuff. So what exactly happened to Gale? You said that he was attacked by a dinosaur?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I just hope he's still alive. Anyway, our first priority is to complete the mission.
What we ought to do is just call in the chopper and get off this death trap.
That's a great idea, but Cooper has the radio, and he's missing. Hey, what's with this monitor?
That's the security monitor for the underground area. The camera's offline.
So I take it that means power still hasn't been restored to the area.
Exactly. They must have that area wired to a different power system than the ground level.
We can investigate that area after we finished our sweep of the ground level.
Okay. Then I'll take care of the shutters that are blocking the way. You work your way in, grab the dock, and then rendezvous back here. Yeah. Now what I want to know is where those things are coming from.
At least they attempt to at least explain why they don't just call for backup. I mean, in the Resident Evil games, I guess you kind of argue it's set in the 90s, so the communications aren't really there. Dino Crisis, it never really says, as far as I'm aware, when it's set. I think there's a little bit more information in Dino Crisis 2, but it's definitely meant to be at least in the future from when the game was made, so at least at some point after the millennium. So it's a bit of a flimsy excuse, but we'll roll with it. So Rick kind of becomes like your oracle, like your hacker man, who will occasionally is basically just used to explain why sometimes things are locked and then things are not locked. It's just kind of I don't want to say Deus Ex Machina, but just used as a plot device in that regard, especially because, you know, hacking in the 90s. And I'm always reminded of that CSI scene. It's like, about 2 gigabytes of RAM will do it. And he's just like almost crossing his hands. I think in my mind palace, I may have kind of crossed over Hacker Man from Kung Fury and that episode. So it probably seems a lot more ridiculous than it actually is, but it's still pretty bad.
Regina, I took care of the shutter. You should be able to access the control panel now.
Already? Already? That was quick. Thanks.
Hey girl, just get going.
The first of several times that Rick will be helping us out. So you'll hear off screen that there is a raptor. So immediately turn the electric fence off, run through, and then turn it back on and start shooting. And as you'll see, this is precisely why we didn't want to fight the raptor earlier. Not only does the pistol take upwards of 10-15 rounds to take out a raptor, but it doesn't have any stopping power. So if you don't have some kind of defense between you and your target, it's just going to run up to you and just start eviscerating you. If you have shotguns, weapons with a little bit more punch, then it's fine, but pistols should never be used to take anything out unless you have a laser fence between them, which fortunately there's a few throughout the facility. Anyway, we're going to make our way into this room, and there is a guard's note on the table. So before tonight's experiment, the Chief and Dr. Kirk will be having a meeting at the second floor lounge from 1 PM. Those who are scheduled to guard should keep a preponderant eye on the area in front of the Chief's room and the surrounding vicinity. Before taking positions, be sure to resupply your ammunition in the custody room. The weapon storage in the custody room can be opened with the combination 0426. Also, we have received information that spies have sneaked into the facility recently. If anything happens, you may have to enter the rooms of the Chief and the Professor in order to ensure their safety. You will find the disc that contains the information you will need to access the rooms on top of the locker. That's all for now. So, similar to my Resident Evil commentaries and a few others I've done, anytime we come across anything that needs to be read, I will read through it. I'm not going to like pause the walkthrough for it and go through it. When I did my original walkthrough, I kind of just blasted through them because the idea was if you're watching it and you want it to read, it's pretty easy just to pause so you can read through it. But anytime we come across anything here, I'll continue the gameplay, but I'll just, keep speaking over it. So you get like I think that's a good way of doing it. You still get the content without it like stopping and starting kind of thing. So things, progress more. Kind of like the holotapes in Dead Space. I think they did those. That was one of the best way of doing it. Not having to like stop the action to read through files. But I mean, the main takeaway from that one is just that there is a code 0426 to get into the safe, which will allow us into the entrance. So I never fully understood why we get that kind of cutscene when we go to the entrance room. We don't really come through here all that often. It's not like a hub world, so it's a bit of an odd choice. I'm not sure if they were just trying to show off like the 3D rendering they had at the time. Stylistically, strange choice, but okay. What we want to do is come through to the front entrance. You can see there's quite a lot of damage there because, well, Dino attacked, presumably by something rather large, and I think that's what it's trying to foreshadow here. Pick up the DDK disc and then go forward and read the file here. Personnel changes of researchers. Old. Section. Special Aircraft Experiment Room. New. Section. Third Energy Physics Laboratory. Registration number 57036. Name, Mark Doyle. So again, the main purpose of that file was just to give us a code. I find you kind of do need to read through it a lot more than you did in Resident Evil. With that game, you could usually just get away with just skim reading it, and then you'll go through and it's like, oh, there's a number there. That must be a code for the safe. With this one, you tend to actually need to understand the context a lot more, especially when we get into the DDK puzzles a little bit later, which is probably the main reason that I never managed to complete Dino Crisis as a kid. Completed all the Resident Evil games as a kid. Dino Crisis 2, no problem, but the puzzles of Dino Crisis, just my smooth, tiny little brain just couldn't comprehend them. So push the kind of square container block to get the anode, and as you come in here, I would kind of recommend taking this raptor out. You can run past him the first time, but this is a particular area that you're going to be coming back and forth quite often, so I find it's actually a good idea to get rid of him. The shotgun is pretty effective at dealing with them, but as you can see, ammo scarcity is a real big issue with Dino Crisis. Even again, I keep comparing it to Resident Evil. Hopefully eventually the comparisons will stop, but compared to Resident Evil, you have to really be on point with it. So as you can see, even with a shotgun, even the basic quote-unquote enemies, the raptors, take 4 or 5 shots. So it's good at stun locking them. When you do get opportunities when they're on the floor and you can take some pot shots with the handgun just to kind of conserve a little bit of ammunition, I'd go for it, because pistol rounds aren't valuable. Shotgun rounds are, and are in very short supply. As a result of tonight's experiment, a strong magnetic storm may occur. Consequently, the communication department will close at 6 p.m. At that time, the antenna will be temporarily stored. To prepare for the emergency, be sure to check the weapon storage locker in the lounge. You can unlock it with the combination 8159. Recently, inexperienced guards have been assigned here, and a common problem is that they do not know how to use the DDK. Here are some points that may not be clear in the manual. Make sure that your staff becomes familiar with this important information. After you set the DDK to the door's locking device, you'll be asked to enter the password code. You will then need to derive the code by using the basic elimination rule. Eliminate the key letters to reveal the correct code. Be sure to try this out by setting an actual DDK to the door locking device. For example, code OXPYEZN with key XYZ. In the above case, the correct password would be open. New product descriptions: recovery aid, an aid, intensifier, multiplier. The 4 chemicals listed above feature our company's latest advancement. They are designed to perform exceptionally, particularly on the front lines, where only the minimum amount of equipment is accessible. By mixing chemicals, the following 2 types of supplies can be created: recovering type, which quickly recovers lost vitality, and anesthetic type. Applied to the head of a bullet or needle, it can put the target to sleep. Supplies that are produced by chemical mixing can be made even more effective with additional mixing. 2 back-to-back files there. So before you leave the room, make sure you pick up the handgun parts from the safe located here. That's using the same code that we picked up from the file out front of the building. If you don't remember or you didn't pick up, that number is 8159. And then moving forward, we're going to come to our first DDK puzzle, which, as you can see, it's pretty simple, although they will get far more difficult. So the first one here is head, and progress forward.
A survivor.
Are you from the rescue team?
Yes, I am. Do you know where I can find Dr. Kirk?
Kirk? That fool! What's he plotting now?
What are you talking about?
Here. Take this.
What's this for?
I don't know. Told me extremely vital.
At least this lovely scientist was kind enough to give his keycard before he passed away. Very convenient of him to say a few lines just right at the end. So pick up a few items in here and then have a look at the keycards you have. So you have one, which you would have picked up right at the start, shortly after meeting up with Rick. And the second one here, which would appear to say Sol on it. Now, for those of you who are eagle-eyed and are good at kind of like thinking outside the box or lateral thinking, you might think, that looks like it's upside down. And you'd be correct. So the puzzle here, and I guess part of that is because games of this ilk around this time, they kind of just present you with stuff, and I guess you don't think about it in that way. Like, you can't rotate an object like this in the same way that you could in Resident Evil. But the puzzle here is that the numbers are upside down. So read both keycards and you'll get the code 705037. So as soon as you get control of Regina here, resist the urge to run for the door, because the T-Rex, as you can probably imagine, being as big as he is, will kill you in one hit and just gobble you up. What you want to try and do is just hold on to your shots and wait for him to open his mouth, and then as he goes to attack you, shoot him with the shotgun. He'll do a roar, which doesn't anything but stun you, so just hold on, wait for it, and 3 shots should be enough to get him to GTFO. So yeah, as you can probably imagine, owing to the sheer magnitude of that unit, most of the T-Rex's attacks will kill you in one hit. And it's something that I believe makes Dino Crisis very tense, because, I mean, even when you fought like Nemesis in number 3, you could at least fight back and take him out, and eventually you do take him out, where the T-Rex, every time you come across him, you maybe have to wound him just to scare him off, or you just have to run from him. You can't fight that thing head on. Quite an interesting tidbit with him is that the T-Rex is actually made from 500 different polygons, which is not a lot by, today's standards. But back then, it was the most fleshed out unit, more fleshed out than our characters that obviously just have faces that are all kind of just one mesh. The T-Rex's eyes will actually swivel, and it's nice they put that detail in.
I've unlocked the shutters near the entrance. One more thing. I just caught a glimpse of something on the monitor that looked human. It should be somewhere near the front of the training room, so check there first.
So this will give us access to the second DDK puzzle. Before we get to that, we're going to do a little bit of mixing. And I must confess, even after having completed it, the mixing is not something that I entirely understand. The few little bits of advice I can give is that an aid should really only be used to create darts, and recovery aid should only really be used for healing items. And you notice that there's a volume and a level. Both healing items and darts will have equivalent levels that when you mix them together can create something stronger. For instance, what we're going to do here is we're going to combine this with resuscitation, which is the highest level, to end up creating some poison darts, which is the highest level of dart. Just kill something rather than put it to sleep. And I really value offensive means more than healing items, because usually healing items is what you use when you kind of fuck up. So here we see how much more complicated these puzzles can get, and basically we have A, B, D, F, G, H, and every time that appears you want to take those letters out. And the password for this one, in case you didn't catch it or you're just listening in, is NEWCOMER. That's the second password. But as a kid I just couldn't quite fathom, was it a case that you just skip those letters once, or was it every time? Which seems obvious now, but bearing in mind I would have been probably, what was it? I used to get picked up by my granddad from school, and he had a PlayStation 1, didn't have a PlayStation 2 at the time, and he loved a lot of these old survival horror type games. And so I would have been like 5 or 6 maybe, and I just I did not yet have the cognitive function to think through these. And fortunately my granddad did help me, well, my step granddad. He's my granddad. He did have like all of these notes that he made when he played through, because he's a big kid. He still is now. He was like telling me how he got the new Xbox and all of that. He never grew up, basically. And he would have all of these like notes on the notepad, and he would like help me with them. And I do kind of miss that about older games. Like I think nowadays, I mean, especially with Discord and whatnot, a lot of times when you play them, you can play with friends, you can stream, you can show off what you're doing. I kind of miss actually being in the same room with someone, especially like a parental figure. There was a lot of joy to be had in that. So this game likes to wrest control from you and then put you in positions that are incredibly unfavourable. With this one, it's simply a case, I mean, you can kind of choose which way to go, but considering the other one was between the two laser fences, I find it's best to do a little bit of a backtrack, put the fence up, and then just shoot them. And this does make what weapons to use at what time very easy for you to figure out. Is there a laser fence? Pistol. If there isn't, not the pistol, unless you enjoy getting mauled. But yeah, it's a good idea to try and get your shotgun ammunition, and especially like your poison darts and your other kind of darts. You want to try and make sure that they can go as far as possible, because ammunition is very scarce in this game. You get quite a few pistol rounds, but as I've already said, they are not gonna help you if you're caught out in the open. They do not have the stopping power to stop a raptor from just tearing your arm off. So only ever use those in situations where you can put that fence up. Make sure you pick up the plug from the dead body outside here and then move into the lecture room. At the front there'll be a key, and then there'll be a bit of a cutscene that's going to play.
Gale, you're still alive. Good timing.
What is it? Another lizard?
That's no lizard. It's a dinosaur.
Dinosaur?
Look, something's really wrong with this place. This whole mission has gone sour.
Hey, it's always eat or be eaten out in the battlefield. No matter who or what you're up against. Any word on the dock yet? I've got to hook up with Rick again. My radio's dead and he's the only one who can fix it.
Following in the tradition of horror movie tropes, if you don't see someone die on screen, then they probably aren't dead. And to the surprise, I would imagine, of absolutely no one, Gale is in fact alive. And when we had the raptor attack earlier, right at the start of the game, you'll notice that the bloodstain that seemed to be trailing off, like, it tries to get you to believe that it's Gale, but it's very obviously just the raptor has, for reasons, decided to drag the rest of the body and start, well, continue munching on him. But yeah, Gale's radio has conveniently broken. Just a good way to, I guess, kind of explain away why he never called back and being like, dude, Regina, there's a friggin' raptor out there. You might wanna be a bit careful about it. But with that out of the way, now we have the key, we're going to get and start up another backup generator. There's a lot of generators we have to get working throughout the course of the game. So the earlier puzzle we did with the different conductors and colors, it comes up again quite a lot, and as with a lot of the puzzles, the later ones will be more tricky. But before we move through here, make sure you push this box out the side, and then, ba-ding, a floating box comes. I always found that quite strange. With Resident Evil games, if you, well, for those of you who haven't, for like the 2% of you who would be watching this and haven't, whenever there's an item, there's normally just like a little glint to show that the item's there, and usually there'll be like a physical thing on like the floor, the desk, wherever it is. Dino Crisis seems to take, I don't know, it seems very strange that the items are rotating. It looks like the same model they use in the first Metal Gear Solid. It's a bit of a strange design choice because it seems very out of place given the rest of the environment, but I guess it was a aesthetic choice so you could actually spot the items quicker. But it always seems weird when you push something and suddenly a box just pops into existence. So with this one, we have to insert the extra battery in, and the solution for this puzzle, if you are struggling, it's a little bit trickier than the other one, is right, center, left, right, center, right. And then once you put that into place, because it doesn't, once you've got the correct orientation, it doesn't start working immediately. You do have to hit the switches, so you need to actually be paying attention. But yeah, put those in and let's fire this baby up.
That you, Regina?
Yeah? So, do we have power yet?
We're in the green, thanks to you. Look, I need you to come back here. There's something I have to talk to you about.
A classic case of not explaining something over the radio when you quite easily could, but at least it gives you, from a gameplay perspective, a bit of an indication of where you're meant to be going next. So as you make our way back, we want to be a little bit careful because we're going to come across another one of those danger situations. So when we were just attacked and saved by Gale a moment ago, that's the game's way of telling you, okay, this is something that can happen, but will give you a free pass. So in that first instance, when the raptor knocks, tail whips you into the board like a little bitch, if you don't do anything, it doesn't matter. Gale will come in and shoot the raptor. However, from every point onwards where you get into an altercation, it starts flashing danger at the bottom. You want to button mash everything to get out of it without taking damage. And it does get quite nasty. Like, there's a couple of times you'll be attacked. If you don't button mash, you'll take damage. A couple of times, it'll just be an instant death. So never let go of your controller. So yeah, mash every button. Don't just shake the controller like my mum used to do when it's a face hugger. Actually press all the buttons, and then I would recommend taking this one out actually. You can make a run for it. There is laser fences a little bit further down the hallway, but the hallway is quite long, and this one seems to just be a bit more aggressive than some of the other enemies, and I find it's quite common that he'll just chase you down and deal some damage, and you know, we like not being bitten. So you notice if you mash that button quick enough, then you won't take any damage. If you're too slow, not only take some damage, but you'll usually be bleeding after that encounter. So it's you know, be on it really. And I suppose bleeding is something that hasn't really come up in other survival horror games. So the weakest form of healing, you get something called a hemostat, which just stops bleeding, and then there's some upgrades you get later on which will heal some health and stop bleeding. And bleeding does what you would probably expect it does. If you don't sort it out, you'll just constantly lose health, and you know that you're bleeding because you'll be leaving a blood trail everywhere you go. So as I said before, the raptors are a hell of a lot more dangerous than zombies and can cause some like serious long-lasting effects on you, so keep an eye out on that.
What's the emergency?
Gale just told me he saw someone on the underground monitor.
It flashed by pretty quick, but I'm sure I saw something. Rick, open the shutter to the underground area. What is it?
It's a distress signal from one of our team members. It must be Cooper.
Yeah, or it might be Tom. He infiltrated this facility posing as one of the researchers. Can you pinpoint the signal?
It's coming from outside of the building, to the east of the rear entrance we came in from.
Look, we'll deal with it later. Our first priority is the survivor in the underground. It could be the doc.
What are you talking about? He's asking for our help. We don't leave our own behind.
And what if it's a trap? Would you want one of us to come and rescue you?
Don't bother. I'm willing to take that risk.
Remember our mission. We're not here to babysit.
That's your way of operating, not mine. All right, you have your access to the underground, Gale, so get moving. You handle your things your way, I'll handle my things my way.
That punk is really starting to get on my nerves. Regina, I'm heading out to investigate the underground.
So this is the first of multiple opportunities you'll get throughout the course of the game to make a decision which diverges the gameplay a little bit. In hindsight, I probably should have done both and then kind of like spliced it together into this video, but I didn't get around to doing that, and there's actually a PlayStation 2 game that has something similar that I'm working on at the moment, and oh dear God, the amount of work required, the amount of playthroughs required. I think when I was making this, I just did not have it in me, and also my editing wasn't as good at the time, so I didn't know how to like splice that footage together to show everything. So we're just going to take Rick's decision because it's arguably the more expedient and easier of the two. If you do want to play it through yourself and you want to see a little bit more of the game, then by all means you can follow this walkthrough up into those points, and then you can take alternative routes and try out something a little bit different, but at least it can help you through a lot of that. And there are actually multiple different endings to this game. The ending that I went for is the one that I consider to be the best. I'm not sure what is canonical or not, but there goes Rick, strutting off by himself in a horror movie, being the dark-skinned gentleman. From what I understand from the initial development of Dino Crisis, they wanted to very much create two characters. One that was all about, you know, pursuing the mission no matter what, and another one that's meant to be more compassionate. And I get that from a narrative standpoint, but considering these are meant to be special forces members, and there's a very strict hierarchy and chain of command, so stuff like this doesn't happen, it always struck me as a little bit weird. I always found this quite an interesting little set piece, although the flashing blue arrow above the shotgun does detract a little bit. But we want to do your best to serpentine to avoid the attacks of the pteranodons to pick up your shotgun. And pretty much every time you come across these, there's not really much point fighting them. They are pretty easy to evade if you just zigzag.
Tom!
They came out of nowhere. Didn't have a chance.
Tom, can you tell us what's going on here?
Kirk's insane. His experiments have nothing to do with energy development.
Tom!
Here, take this.
His wounds are pretty bad. We have to move him someplace safe immediately.
So yes, this is Tom, the 5th member of our team. So 5 members in total, so obviously the 3 we flew in with, Gina, Rick and Gail. And then you had Tom, who infiltrated the facility earlier as kind of like a undercover agent. And then we had Cooper, who was meant to deploy with us at the beginning, got flown off track and was the one that got eaten by the T-Rex. So I think there was a little bit of misdirection there, because you hear this SOS, it's like, oh, was it Tom? Was it the person before? Or is it just an SOS coming from the inside of the T-Rex, potentially, a la Jurassic Park 3? Yeah, somehow simultaneously one of the few good scenes in that movie, and also one of the dumbest. Like, how on earth can you hear a phone ringing from inside of a Spinosaurus 40 feet away? Interesting sequel. Anyway, we come to our pipe puzzle here, which actually, if you don't know what you're doing, I really actually struggled with this, just because you don't really see what the pipes are. And so trying to figure out how they mesh together, it looks really easy if you know how to do it. But if you don't, it's like quite difficult to, you don't know like the orientation of the pipes. But the easiest way to solve it is to go in clockwise fashion and go red, green, blue going down on the right, and then again red, green, blue going up on the left-hand panels, which will combine all of our pipes together. And a part of the difficulty of this comes from the fact that if it can't fit, it will come down, get stuck, and then go back up. So you don't even know like what the full orientation of the pipe is. There's like no diagram or schematic. It's kind of just trial and error until you manage to get it working. But activating the pipe will activate the generator here. I'm presuming it's some kind of hydrothermal one. I'm not entirely certain, but the puzzle's done. So pick up a few bits that we have here. We've got another DDK from near Tom, and we're just going to do a little bit of like inventory management more than anything. You'll find that I tend to use up most of my healing items just because I played through this game quite a few times to get the ins and outs of when enemies will appear. And with a lot of cyber horror games, I think once you know what to expect, it definitely makes it a lot easier. Like you see a lot of people speedrunning Resident Evil games and they just blitz through them. So on your first few playthroughs, perhaps you want to keep them on board. But once you get a little bit more familiar, again, sometimes offense is the best defense. kind of love that cutscene, as goofy as it is. And I have to ask, the amount of blood that Regina has lost just from cutscenes alone at this point, she should be feeling woozy. I always found like a certain sense of disconnect whenever you play through a lot of cyber horror games, because especially with like the Resident Evil ones, it's like, oh, you've been bitten by a zombie, why aren't you turning? And it was always the idea that any attack or bite you have when you're playing is non-canon, which is why you don't see him get attacked in the cutscenes. But Regina gets wrecked in the cutscenes in this game, so there's that there. Also, with that particular panic mode, you do have to mash the buttons. If you don't, you end up in the blender with the pterodon as well. So be careful of that. It can actually be quite difficult to do. You have to really mash it, otherwise that's an instant death.
Finally, we have access to the elevator outside.
Good. Now we can head straight down to the underground. So you saw the beast, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Pteranodon, wasn't it?
I meant you saw that it was a real dinosaur. It's unbelievable.
Didn't I tell you?
This is just like that movie.
Yeah, for some reason the dialogue for Dino Crisis has been pretty good up until this point, at least if you compare it to the early Resident Evil days, but that particular bit of, like, that exchange there just seems so stilted. Did you see the beast? It's kind of like when you have someone whose only experience of social interactions comes from having read books several hundred years old, and they think that everyone speaks like that. It just seems really bizarre. I don't know why Rick suddenly starts talking like that. Maybe Rick was in the Poetry Society before he went into Special Forces.
Regina. We have to hurry. Tom's not going to last much longer.
I'll clear a path by moving these containers. You just keep an eye on Tom.
Now, much like the conductor puzzles that we've come across previously, this is another puzzle that's going to end up recurring a few times and will progressively become more difficult every time we come across it. For reasons best understood by whoever designed the machinery, instead of having a crane that operates like, you know, a normal crane does, where you just have a joystick to move up, down, and then you go down and up, instead we have this system. I'm not even sure how best to describe it, but basically if you want to hook anything in the middle, you have to go up 2, down 1, and then pick it up. And why you would have a system like this, I'm guessing maybe they thought it was more complicated and they could charge more money to send in specialists to actually work the damn thing. But basically for this one, and you can get it to release and then hook something in one go, so you can do it all in one move. Essentially what we have here is like a 3x3, and we start in the bottom right hand side, and what you want to do is move both of the middle pieces, which is what we're doing here, to clear a way forward for you. Incredibly esoteric, and unfortunately this puzzle will come up again, only more difficult later on, because, you know, why would you make machinery that's intuitive and easy to use when you could not do that?
Will do. Concentrate on the mission and leave the rest to me.
Right.
Oh yeah. If Gil gives you any more of his bull, be sure to beat him down for me, okay?
Now And there's a little memo up ahead, so we're going to read that now. Today's to-do. Prepare the DDKs needed to enter the laboratory area. Tomorrow I have to go to the computer room to do maintenance on Dr. Kirk's computer. But I think I left a DDK at the large size elevator control room when I went there yesterday to do the elevator maintenance. I'll have to check it later today. As for the other DDK, I think the rookie guy Tom, who was recently assigned to the laboratory area, has it. I'll have to borrow it from him. I have no idea how that jerk approached Kirk, but he seems to have gained his complete trust. It's weird how nobody knows his past history.
Rick, watch out! Chew on this!
Now, I think it has to be said that both Rick and Tom are kind of inspirational, because if you're able to make it as a spy and as a special forces operative with zero spatial awareness whatsoever, to the point that I'm fairly certain you're either blind or walk around wearing like those blinkers that they have on horses, you should be able to do anything with your life. How the hell you walk into a room and see a big ass lizard? No, not see a big ass lizard. They didn't see a big ass lizard. They just walked in, shut the door behind them, and walked 3 feet before noticing it. That's special right there. They've also managed to teleport several corridors ahead of us, and instead of waiting for Regina's help, because, you know, it just makes sense that you'd send the injured person in first, you know, but you have to get rid of him for story reasons. So yeah, Tom has unfortunately bitten the dust. He was very nice from the 5 minutes we got to see of him.
Rick,
He's dead.
it's not your fault.
Yeah. I'll be in the control room.
I mean, it was a little bit your fault, running off ahead, not checking corners. Basic training stuff. Anyway, there's a memo here. Dr. Sherwood, the ID card on the desk belongs to one of the patients. Please hand it to Colonel Clay when he shows up. He told me that he was going to hold a meeting in the strategy room on the first floor to make preparation for tonight's experiment. Please make sure to hand the card to him, since one is required to enter the strategy room. So yeah, regardless of if you do choose to follow Rick's plan or Gale's plan, Tom's fate's sealed. There is no way to save him. He's just too injured by the time you get to him, and it is what it is. But moving forward, I mean, admittedly, we haven't really progressed the story much with that little detour, but we've gotten a few extra bits that's going to help us progress further through the facility. So head back to the control room, and they'll have a little cutscene with Rick, who's going to tell us, well, we'll figure out where to go next.
What? Oh, I don't see any signs of Doc here.
And by that, I mean he's going to be busy moping around and not giving us any information. But hey, as a black guy, he wasn't the first to die, so that's pretty progressive for 90 standards. And it's unlikely that he's going to die after they get out of this mission, seeing as he's probably going to lose his job for insubordination and not following his commander. So win-win, win-win-win-win. Anyways, with a little detour, we have picked up a few extra items. So our next step now is to make our way to the strategy room, which was previously locked. When you move back through this area, you will, well, hear, notice, see, experience that a lot of the raptors will become repopulated. And it can be a little bit difficult, I do find, moving into this game, that the ammunition you get is very, very limited, especially the better ammunition for like the shotgun and the more poison darts. With the darts, a lot of the ones that you get are actually like tranquilizer darts, and the idea being that you put someone to sleep and then you can move past them and you incapacitate them rather than killing them outright. And I think that's another reason why this game becomes quite difficult if you don't know what you're doing. because you're not putting them out permanently. And that means backtracking through areas if you've forgotten something or you get lost can become really dangerous because enemies will come back up and you don't have the ammo to deal with it. Anyway, in the strategy room, let's read this file of ID management. Earlier in the week, there was a case in which someone used a terminal that rewrites the ID cards to gain unauthorized access. This person acquired the fingerprint data from the corpse of a staff member who had died in the accident. He forged the dead man's ID by using the fingerprint data and entered the laboratory area by way of elevator. The problem is that the fingerprint collecting device can acquire usable fingerprint data even from a corpse. Since we will be having an experiment today, there will be many outsiders visiting this facility. When creating the ID cards for the guests, keep a careful eye on the device. Right, with that done, what we're going to do is take our FC device and we're going to use it on one of the mauled corpses. I say not one of the mauled corpses, the only mauled corpse at the elevator room. We're going to use the fingerprints from that to be able to access a computer terminal a little bit later on, although we're going to do a little bit of inventory management here. So I understand that Dino Crisis came out after Resident Evil, and I think that kind of factored into they were trying everything they can to differentiate themselves. They didn't just want to be, you know, Resident Evil but with dinosaurs, even though that's exactly what it's remembered for. And you can see that in a lot of things, like the way we have 3D rendered backgrounds rather than the pre-rendered ones, which I must admit don't age as well. And we have a combination of static cameras, but there's also quite a few times where it kind of moves with it as well, which can be probably even more disorientating than if it was just static, like this way it moves. Maybe they were trying to show off some more of the technology they had available at the time. I'm not entirely certain. If they were going to go with a camera like that, I kind of just would have preferred it to be behind your character, so you don't get caught out by, you know, a raptor around the corner. But again, I think there was just suffering a little bit from an identity crisis and just trying to pave their own way a little bit. The change of personal documents for this individual have not been turned in yet. Paul Baker, pager number 1123. Researcher personal changes. Old. Section. Special Aircraft Experiment Room. New. Section. Third Energy Stabilizer Experiment Room. Registration number 58104. Name Paul Baker. And so yeah, just put in our code 58104 to be registered. And yeah, just to reiterate that final point a little bit further, I really wish they had kind of used the same inventory management system from Resident Evil. I do find when you just have like little slots like that, it can be really kind of confusing to like know where everything is. It reminds me a little bit of Oblivion, where instead of having like, for instance, on like Diablo, you have like a little picture of your character so you can see where the ring is, where the shield is, where the greaves and whatnot. Instead, you just have like a little bar saying that an item's equipped and an item isn't equipped. And it becomes like really confusing to visualize it, especially when you're wondering, why can I only wear 2 rings? Why can't I wear 5 on each hand, you know? Yeah, I would have preferred it if they had perhaps done it a little bit differently, but yeah, I think they were trying to differentiate themselves a little bit more, and not everything they did worked out entirely well. You can't have an elevator scene without preying on that fear of the claustrophobia. How did a raptor get up there and know to jump you like that and to lift it off? Who knows? Don't care. Fuck it. It's attack you. It's scary. Take him out of the shotgun quickly and then go read the memo here because it's going to give you a little bit of help with the DDKs. DDK, the electronic lock system of this facility, has been updated. A more intricate code system has been introduced and the security level has been improved. You will need to be aware of the following information when entering the password. Number-based key decoding, Part 1. In a case where numbers are written instead of letters in the key field, the numbers could represent the codes for the corresponding characters. Here is an example of a correspondence chart between the letters and the code numbers. A1, B2C3. Putting all of that information together gives us the password laboratory, and it's quite useful, I find, with a lot of these passwords. They're not just, you know, actual passwords. When you see someone that have LKP49_4168-7, you know, just something random or something computer generated. If you've had to get your password reset at work or something and it's just some nonsense that you can't remember. Fortunately, all the passwords through here, they will spell out a word, and it's usually related in some way. Like the first one we came across was head, because it was the head department or the head office. This one's laboratory because you're going into laboratory. So even if you're struggling a little bit there, you can kind of guess what it might be. In addition to that, one thing I probably should have mentioned a bit earlier if you're trying to work it out yourself is that the DDK discs, you'll have different ones. You have like DDK-H, DDK-W, etc. The letter that the DDK is associated with always makes up the first letter of the password. So if you're struggling to try and figure out where to even begin, hopefully that can narrow it down. Although that particular set of extra rules that we've been given isn't too difficult. So, you know, the numbers 1 to 26 correspond to letters A to Z, and it's just a case of a 1-to-1. So if you see a 2 that corresponds to B, you take B out of it. Relatively simple figuring out that one. It does get a little bit more complicated. In fact, we're going to see very shortly that there is a new rule that gets added almost immediately just to make life more difficult for us, which is a lot more complicated, but I'll talk through that as we get to it. Anyway, there's a memo up ahead, and I'm going to read it now just so it doesn't conflict. March. Third energy. It is the system that can produce infinite energy from the air. The completion of this system will signify the end of one of society's greatest problems. It is true that the system was initially developed for military use, but we took part in the project because there is a silver lining in it for our future. But something is terribly wrong. The military has been giving us excessively favorable treatment for the simple development of a fundamental energy system. I must discover the true purpose of this project before irreparable harm is done. What on earth is that kid planning to do? April. I haven't found any clues in the past month. He is indeed a genius. He seems to have noticed our secret investigation activities. I heard that he established a secret lab on this floor somewhere. The only way to learn of his true intentions will be to find that lab. July. At long last, Mike has found a clue pertaining to the location of the secret laboratory. He said that he hid the clue in our secret place inside the library room. Kirk has been meeting frequently with Colonel Clay, the leader of the project, in the computer room lately. What are they up to? Security Manual Volume 2. DDK, the electronic lock system of this facility, has been updated. A more intricate code system has been introduced which improves the level of security. You will need to be aware of the following information when entering the password. Number-based key decoding, Part 2. In a case where numbers are written instead of letters in the key field, the numbers could indicate the rows to be deleted. For example, if 2 is in the key word, you should delete all of the letters from the second row of the code. Right, now if you're anything like me, having read that, that makes precisely 0 sense to me, but for the next password that we're coming along, the next DDK, we need to understand that, but I'll explain it a little bit more when we get there, because it's one of those things where if you read like instructions or you read like an SOP prior to having any knowledge of what you're going to do in the area, you don't know what it means because you don't have like a frame of reference. So we're just going to leave that for now and move on to the gas puzzle. So in the manual that we read earlier, it was like telling us different colors of gas to basically neutralize it. Now, the best way I've found of doing this is to input the following code. So 1 red, 2 blue, 3 green, 4 red, 5 green, 6 red, and finally 7 blue, and that should neutralize this area and allow us to go in and speak to the injured researcher inside. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's meant to be I don't know if that's the best way of doing it, but I always found that to work pretty well for me, so just do that.
You're gonna be okay. What happened?
That fool.
Who are you talking about?
What are you planning, Kirk?
I'm here with the rescue team. Where is Dr. Kirk?
Here. This will give you access to his personal lab.
Alright, so we got the numbers there, and then make sure you check his body for a key before you end up moving out. And as we go to leave, we'll find that a raptor has figured out how to camouflage like a predator. Now the game's actually quite generous after this particular dino attack. We'll kick the raptor in the face and, well, should become quite obvious with the puzzle we've just been done, that we can channel our inner Führer and gas the raptor out. It actually won't let you leave the room until the raptor's been dealt with. It says there's like some contamination breach or something. Apparently, yeah, they can detect that there's a giant raptor there. I don't know. Don't think about it too much, but at least rather than having to like press lots of buttons, you just have to press one of the gas stations. It'll fill up very quickly. It'll take the raptor out. And that's that section done. So we have our key and we have a new code. So we need to progress further into the laboratory. Now there are still a few roaming raptors around. We did manage to run past a few of them earlier just because we're trying to save some ammunition. But for this particular section, I would recommend just taking them out. And like we have the laser fence there. And now we've upgraded our pistol a little bit. They will do a decent chunk of damage. Still not fantastic. It's still not going to be able to stun lock them. So again, if you don't have a laser field in the way, I would not recommend using it. But you can tell from the noise it's making that it does a bit more damage. I think there's a bit more recoil to it. It definitely feels like it. Although that said, at this particular moment in time, it doesn't look like it's doing too much more damage, other than the fact that it does sound a lot meatier. But best to save our darts and our shotgun rounds, so just use that to take them out before we proceed further into the laboratory. Our next stop on our sightseeing tour of Dr. Kirk's madhouse is the mainframe room, where there is a little, kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Lawnmower Man type puzzle, or maybe Tron, but maybe that's also because I wasn't born back then, so it's the only point of reference I have for old school kind of hacking stuff. So we got some handgun parts, which are going to upgrade our pistol a little bit more. Still not something you want to rely upon without a laser fence. At no point does a pistol become something you want to tackle a raptor out with in the open. And using the Kipchi we got from the dead researcher in the poison room, as you can see there, 3695. So insert that, put the password in, and we are ready to start hacking. It's so nice they just let us go ahead and do it. So our next step is to overwrite the magnetic chip, and it's kind of hard to describe this one in words just because there's so many perforations going down. So just watch closely, and it should only take 4 moves to get done. Dear Paul, I finally found the clue. This is the key card that you need to enter his secret lab. The only chance to enter it is during tonight's experiment. Obtain the other key card without hesitation. The other key card is in the chief's room. I heard the secret codes for the hidden safe are written on the panel keys. Now if we find out where the laboratory is, everything will be solved. I'll leave that to you. Good luck, Mike. So with everything we need, we're going to make our way back into the computer room where we're going to call Gale. Unfortunately, he kind of just teleports after a short cutscene. Speaking of the cutscenes, I know a few times the voices will kind of like jitter a little bit and repeat themselves like at the start and then again later. That's because this is run through an emulator. I did fiddle with the settings quite a bit, but I unfortunately wasn't able to change that, so...
I finally made it to the entrance of the doctor's lab.
Good work.
The door looks like it needs 2 people working in tandem to unlock it.
Sit tight. I'll be right there. So, what's our status?
Here, take this.
Ready? Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3.
So I find that this DDK is particularly difficult just because it doesn't explain very well what you're meant to be doing, and it kind of changes the rules, what we've been following up until this point, without really telling you what differentiates it. So for this one we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, space, 7, space, 9. And the trick to it is everything above those numbers to delete, which will give us the passcode energy. If that doesn't make sense, try pausing the video and hopefully work through it. So stepping into the simulation room, we finally see the first evidence of the third energy project that Dr. Kirk's been working on. And I do find it quite amusing that there was a memo earlier about this person going, I don't understand why the military has been giving us so much attention and help. It's not like, you know, we're only trying to create perpetual energy. Like, the game kind of like downplays it as if it's not that big of a deal. And it's like, dude, like, absolutely the military would be interested in being able to power everything without power sources. What are you talking about? That'd be the best invention since cooking on the internet.
He's not here.
Why? This operation is taking way too long already.
Warning. The emergency system has been activated. Emergency lockdown in progress.
What's going on?
Oh, Kirk must have tripped off the security system. That fool.
What's your status, Regina? I'm reading an emergency lockdown in your section.
We're trapped inside here. Kirk must have triggered it off. We didn't touch anything.
Can you clear it?
I'll see what I can do.
What's wrong with this thing?
Cool it, Gale. We'll find a way out somehow.
Gale being a absolute mood here as usual. So, in order to get out of here, what you're going to do is go to the toolbox and pick up a screwdriver, and because this game doesn't seem to have contextual commands a lot of the time, go over to the circuit board and use the screwdriver in it, and I cannot tell you how long that took me to figure out when I first started, because it just... yeah. So you'll have this puzzle, which is kind of a bit like the flow water puzzles used to have, but you have like plates as opposed to individually. The way to do this is you want to get part B, turn it right once, take part C, turn it right once, and then what you do is want to put part C down first, then A, then B. So it is quite confusing, but yeah, do that and you bypass the circuitry and we're free.
Warning. The emergency lockdown has been bypassed. You have 10 minutes until this section is sealed off.
We'd better get moving. We've bypassed the door lock and we're on our way out.
That's great, but the entire underground area is crawling with dinosaurs. You'll never be able to make it through there.
Don't sweat it. I'll take them all out one by one if I have to.
Brilliant plan, fearless leader, but I have a better one. These readouts tell me there's an emergency escape hatch in the doc's private quarters. You should be able to make a clean break through there.
Are you sure?
Yeah, but there's one problem. The hatch is password locked through the mother system.
Forget it. If you can't crack the code before the dinosaurs rush in, we'll be completely trapped.
I know. You'll just have to trust me.
I don't.
Fine. What about you?
Make your choice.
Now, I get that Gale obviously has a problem with Rick, but I always find it strange that he didn't try to convince Regina to come with him, as he is meant to be the leader character. I would highly recommend actually following his strategy in this particular one, just because if you follow Rick's, you have to solve this puzzle, and it's actually quite difficult, and I really should have shown the different paths you could have taken and like edited it a little bit more. If I made this walkthrough today, that's what I would do, but it was one of my earlier ones. So if we take Gale's method, you can just run through most of the raptors around here. The layout is in such a way, and as you can see here, we're just trying to skirt around the outside just to avoid them. And also, because we know we're not going to have to come back here at any point, it's actually a really good idea to use a lot of your darts. I know I mentioned previously that I'm not a big fan of the sleeping darts because you don't know what you're going to have to backtrack through, and so you don't know if you're going to have to kill something, or if you don't kill it now, are you just wasting darts because you have to keep backtracking through and you have to keep putting to sleep. But when we try to make the breakout here, any of these raptors are not going to have to deal with again, so just put the one in the way to sleep, and as you can see I turned the laser fence on as I went through just so I don't get chased down. But this one to sleep just because it's quite a long corridor you have to run through, and even though the raptor's getting up, he can catch up with you and do some damage from behind, so I put him to sleep. And then there is one more raptor as we go through to the materials, or carrying in materials area, which is just slap bang in your way. So put him to sleep, run past, and that's Gale's methods done. So less than 2 minutes to do his section. It's actually not that difficult.
Gale!
You're a lucky guy, Doc.
So this must be the elusive Dr. Kirk.
Yeah. Gave us quite a run for our money. You get around, don't you? Just like a rat. And you got this whole island set up as your little maze.
Well, I am glad I kept you entertained, tough guy.
Shut up.
I'm surprised they sent someone after me. I had heard they reported me as deceased.
If that's the way you want it, I'd be more than happy to oblige. So what'll it be, genius?
Relax, Agent. My study is nearing its final stages. Magnificent, isn't it? But I can't leave before I've analyzed the final results.
I don't give spit about your results. I'm taking you back under orders, so shut up and follow me. Regina, locate the communication facility and call in the extraction chopper.
You can't do this! I have rights!
According to command, your government property, pal. I suggest you take it up with them.
No! They can't do this to me! They deserted me 3 years ago and now they want me back? This is preposterous!
Shut up.
And shoot me, idiot! You lame, flat-top, jaw-headed...
Shut up. Where's the communication room?
Take the elevator up from the control room.
I need a card to access that elevator. I know you've got one. Hand it over, Doc.
Fine.
So, we're all set then. I'll meet you at the heliport.
Hey, wait, where are you going?
I have a little unfinished business to take care of. I'll drop this guy off with Rick. Now get moving.
Unfinished business?
Unfinished business is basically the writer's way of saying we need to get this character away from here because we don't have the programming to have him follow you at this point, but we can't think of a reasonable reason for it to happen. So it happens quite a lot in Resident Evil as well. And oh my god, halfway through and I'm still comparing to Resident Evil. That's not going to change. Make your way to the computer room where Rick normally is. And the two raptors that we put to sleep originally coming through here should still be asleep. I'm not entirely certain how the time works. I'm fairly certain it's like based on in-game time. So if you have a cutscene or when you're moving from room to room and you have like this transition period, it's not going to speed up how quickly they wake up. So as long as you're quick with this area, they shouldn't be waking up again. We're going to make our way back into here just because there is an emergency box and there's a resuscitation we have in there, and we still have one sleeping dart, so we're going to mix that with our resuscitation, which is going to give us 6 poison darts, which we've been trying to save for most of the game up until this point just because there's some really tough enemies towards the end, and as with a lot of survival horror games, you don't want to be wasting the good ammunition because usually you have like tougher fights at the end, so it pays to stock up now to make the end game easier. And that's definitely something that I noticed playing a lot of these types of games when I was younger. I even remember I bought a PlayStation 2 memory card and it had a save of Code Veronica on it. Like it was a second-hand one from CEX or whatever, and I end up plugging it in, and he's like, "Oh, he's used up all of the grenade rounds. He must have killed the giant worm thing." And I go there, and he's still alive. And it's like, "What the hell were you using grenade rounds on? Just normal zombies?" I've never been so angry at someone that I've never met before. But just why did that happen? But yeah, we finally met Dr. Kirk, and I often wonder why it is that the only archetype there seems to be for scientists, especially bad scientists, is of like the mad genius type. Like the way he describes his research of it being magnificent and glorious and all that kind of thing is very unlike how actual scientists would speak. A lot of if you've read any kind of like research papers, or if you've even spoken to them, a lot of the time they try to avoid using adjectives because that's not scientific. You want to be concise, quick, and to the point. And I think a lot of this archetype in like cultural zeitgeist comes from like the original interpretation of Dr. Frankenstein. Like if you've actually read the book, and I remember reading the book back in the day and being really a little bit annoyed because they overuse the word benevolent so much. But I think a combination of that book and the fact that there is just so much literary prose in it, and then you go to the original Hammer horror with Frankenstein shouting, "It's alive!" There's like this idea that scientists are very literary minded, very flowery with their words, when in reality most of them are quite the opposite, because you need to be concise and to the point. You don't use a lot of adjectives because that doesn't convey meaningful information. So I don't know, I just find that interesting. It happens with most of the scientists, like Dr. Spencer from Resident Evil and Dr. Curian from House of the Dead as well. It just seems to be something that's quite prevalent of video games around this time. So we're making our way up to the antenna room, which we weren't able to get into previously. And as you saw earlier, when I came up here, I've changed the ammunition for my shotgun from darts to slugs. Or shotgun shells, actually. It shouldn't matter too much which one you pick. And the reason for that is we're going to have a very imminent encounter with an old friend.
busy right now. Do something about it.
Don't sweat it. I'll release the lock. It's a...
It is very easy to get killed at this point, so as soon as the cutscene ends, start running straight ahead. Move slightly to the left, so as you get bashed in by the T-Rex, you get knocked to the side of the door. Then back up, make sure you don't have to reload, so make sure you got a full clip and fire at him every time he opens his mouth. It is very easy to get eaten here, so be on point with it.
It's open. All Regina, do you copy?
Finally, a signal.
Signal's weak. Interference. Static.
I'll give you the abridged version. Mission complete. Scrub the initial plans and pick us up at the heliport immediately.
The heliport.
This entire island's a blood bank. The only survivor not on the team is the doctor. I'll give you the details later. Just get back here and pick us up ASAP.
Roger, I'm on my way. Regina, what's the situation?
The chopper's on its way here.
Great. Don't waste any time. And remember, use the main entrance to get to the heliport.
See, at least the developers at this point were self-aware enough to know that most people have no fucking clue where the heliport was. I remember the first time I played this, it's an area you've never been to before, so... But I guess the idea with, you know, having the map and everything is that you are meant to be a special forces agent, and you would get briefed on like the general blueprints and layout of what you're going into. Just obviously as a game, we're not gonna be privy to that information because it's kind of boring, and you don't want to start your game with like an hour briefing before you can actually play, because 90% of your player base would have switched off at that point. But yeah, we are moving on to the heliport, and this is basically the transition period from the first half to the second half of the game. So if there's any items that you've left that you've not managed to pick up or anything like that, make sure you go and collect them now, because we're not going to be returning to this area, which again was why we were using the sleeping darts previously, because we knew that we were safe to use them. So we're going to head to the main room and head outside, and as we go outside there's this weird little cutscene where you see some pterodons. I always call them pterodactyls. I think technically these ones are pterodons. From an etymological point of view, the pterodons are bigger and they don't have teeth, they just have like these beaks, whereas pterodactyls do. That's the main distance as far as I'm aware. But regardless, biology aside and paleontology aside, we get this weird kind of cutscene where they fly down and show themselves, and it makes me think that maybe in an early version of this game, this was meant to be the first part that you came across them, and maybe they like changed some things around, and I don't know, it's just a very, very odd kind of cutscene. But as previously, whenever you're dealing with them, just kind of serpentine, especially when they're about to swoop down. You can kind of just run straight, and then as you see as they're about to swoop down, if you make a hard, or not even that hard, just a slight adjustment to the left or right, they'll miss you completely. So a few raptors will break through the fencing as we run down here. If you're very quick, you don't have to bother fighting them. Just keep running straight, and when you kind of cut the corners, if you kind of do it quite close like this, they have... They almost behave almost like tanks. I think pterodactyls have their own kind of tank controls. So if you cut the corner very fine, they have to run past and then turn around to attack you. So think of it like a racing game. Go take the close corner outside to inside, and you can get past without getting attacked. So make sure you come up here, because the first time I played it, I completely forgot to do this. And you get the grenade launcher, and you do not want to be facing the second half of the game without that. It is possible to miss it, and you have to face the entire second half of just like the shotgun, the pistol, and you don't want to be doing that. It's very tricky as a result. The puzzle here, I'm embarrassed to admit, took me a lot longer to figure out than I meant to, purely because like I kept making little mistakes. It is possible to soft lock yourself here, like, well, not soft lock really. If you do push something too far, just leave the door and come back and the puzzle will reset. So you want to push the first box quite far north, but not all of the way. You just want to leave like a very slight gap so you can squeeze your way through. You get to the second box here, and you want to push it exactly one box over to the right, and then we want to push this one down. So the reason we have the runway running up is to kind of see what the layout is so we don't mess it up, and as a result to try and like encourage us, even on repeat playthroughs I guess, to actually go up there and have a look, because again it is easy to mess up. You put that grenade launcher at the end and it just helps you to really familiarize yourself with the area. So, and I always get confused because the two red boxes there look like they're stacked up on each other. It looks like you can climb them, but no, you can't. I mean, it would be surely much easier just to climb the boxes than do this, but Regina wants to show off her gains. So yeah, move the bottom one all the way to the right, and then move this one upwards, and we should be good to go. Again, there's a couple of little items around here. If you have space for them, pick it up, but with this case, it's just an aid, and we're not going to worry too much about that because we have grenade bullets here, and I greatly value grenade bullets over an aid.
You okay, Regina?
Where's Gale?
I don't know. Haven't heard a word from him. What's he doing? Finally. You know, I had a really bad feeling about this mission. All things considered, it could have been a lot worse.
That's odd. Something must have those animals spooked.
So Jurassic Park The Lost World came out 2 years before Dino Crisis, and I can't help but think that that was kind of important through creating this set piece. So as you can see, there's just from a gameplay point of view, there isn't really a huge amount to this. What you want to do is keep running around the helicopter, and then every now and then what you're going to see is that I'm aiming my gun, and the reason for that is, despite the fact that T-Rex being massive, because of these not so much fixed camera angles, because they are moving, they're not static like they are in other games, but you don't get full range of motion, you get what the game wants to see. So every now and then I'm going to aim my gun just so I know where the T-Rex is, and so I don't run too fast and end up just running into the back of him and getting eaten up. But I mean, yeah, from a gameplay point of view, it's not really all that in depth, but it's just that one angle as you come round in just a second and you see the T-Rex moving behind it and just like peering its head out from the crashed helicopter. Despite it being quite an old game, and obviously, you know, the graphics are not, they have not stood the test of time as good as certain other ones, and especially not as good as Resident Evil has with its static backgrounds, because you know, they're more just pictures. Obviously a picture doesn't really, it's more the art design as opposed to like the graphical fidelity, but there's just something very cinematic I find about this encounter. It's a little bit disappointing that it isn't a little bit more in depth, but I think what it was trying to convey is like just how out of your depth you are. You can't run, you can't, well, you can run, you can't hide, I should say, you can't fight back, and so it just tries to instill this panic. It's like, oh my god, what the hell am I meant to be doing right now, because this thing could just come and eat me and just instant death me at any point. And that's definitely something that was missing a little bit in Dino Crisis 2. When you get attacked by the T-Rex in that, you take a hefty chunk of damage, but you don't get instant killed. It's a lot more actiony, a lot more arcadey than this one, and there is a certain sense of palpable fear you get here.
Regina, over here!
Rick firing his gun there to signify that you've spent enough time distracting the T-Rex. He managed to get the elevator open, so run across to there and progress onwards. There is another hemostat here, same with the other side of the crashed wreckage, but chances are you're probably not going to need it, so just move onwards.
We're screwed. The chopper's history. How are we gonna get out of here?
Calm down. We'll just have to find another way.
Oh, come off it. You're never this positive. Ah!
What happened?
Elevator shot. We'll have to find another way.
So in all the confusion of our little foot escaping from that particular shark tooth, of course Dr. Kirk has managed to slip away. And now we are very much entering what was mentioned in some of the memos, Dr. Kirk's secondary secret laboratory. Not entirely certain how you would manage to keep that a secret from so much of your staff, but just roll with it. And you also can't say that the way that the compies jump down here is not very reminiscent of the way that they kind of jump over the logs and took out Peter Stormare in Lost World. Like there's a lot of inspiration being taken. Just the addition of compies, like it had to be because they were so prominent in the zeitgeist at the time. So we're going to make our way in here, and there is a useless item that we're not going to pick up, and also a memo. There's compies around here, but if we're quick enough, we can read the memo. And obviously Regina has such a strong feminine charm that when she starts reading, she has the power of freezing everyone around her. Where the heck did these monsters come from? I managed to slip away, but I've been cornered here in the basement ever since. The only way I can get out is through the ports on level B3. I should be able to find a boat or something used to transport research materials. The only problem is getting there in one piece. I always find it quite strange how they refer to them as monsters when they're quite clearly fucking dinosaurs. Like, I'm not certain if perhaps there's a specific word in Japanese that's like more of a catch-all term, and so it's a bit of a translation issue, but it doesn't quite read right.
You done yet?
What do you mean? Of course. Let's get moving.
So, I think I found a way out of here.
Right on, girl. Let's hear it.
Ever been in an elevator with someone you don't know and it's super awkward? Definitely getting those vibes here. I think her saying that she's found a way out here is meant to be referencing the memo, but she'll say that if you haven't read it, so yeah.
Okay, we're here again. Now what?
We should be able to get to the underground port from here.
Yeah, then let's do it.
Hurry! I'm worried about Gale.
Our fearless leader? Fine. Let's move out.
Of course, the fact that they seem to have found an escape route because they read a memo saying that there is a port nearby with a boat does beg the question of what on earth were they doing during all of the reconnaissance period? I mean, you had a helicopter going around the entire island. You would think you'd be able to notice the port, but yeah!
What happened?
Ah, this piece of junk must have blown a fuse.
What's going on? The power went out.
Gale? Are you on floor B3?
Yeah, get the power online now.
Gale, it looks like there's a port nearby. There's gotta be a ship we can use.
Copy. Leave Kirk to me. You two get the power back online and secure our escape route.
battery's completely dead.
This is the first puzzle, I can't even call it a puzzle, that genuinely confuses me, and like it just comes across almost just as padding to waste your time. All you have to do is go into the side room and you're going to pick up the white battery to replace the broken one in there, and there's no like challenge to it, there's nothing to it at all, it's kind of just to waste your time. I kind of assumed that maybe this is set up so it gives you time to acclimatize to the new environment before we start throwing stuff at us, but I don't know. I know it's not a big deal, it takes like 30-40 seconds to go and do it, but it just seems pointless.
Perfect. This is all we need to restore the power. I'll work on the security system. You handle our escape route. What?
Rick, once again, running off to the nearest computer room he can find, much like the computer nerd he is. I say unironically whilst I'm staring at my 3 monitors. It's going to basically be your safe area from this section onwards, or at least for a little while. There's multiple safes in here that you can use to like get items. You need a lot of plugs for them, so you will be coming back and forth through this area. So this is officially the second section of the game, and you'll notice that there is a lot of grenade ammo lying around. Make sure, as I mentioned earlier, that you do not forget to pick up the grenade launcher. It's very easy to miss it when you're moving the crates out, especially if you played it once or twice before and you're just trying to go for it quickly, or if you're following this guide to miss that, and it makes the section a lot more difficult, speaking from experience.
Well, I've definitely reached the system's core. These security protocols are brutal. Finally, a challenge worthy of my talents.
By brutal, he means that he's doing what every coder does, where he goes, it doesn't work, and I have no idea why. I'm going to change a few things. Oh, now it works. I have no idea why. I love the 90s idea of hacker man. It's beautiful. Mwah, chef's kiss. So yes, as you probably suspected, if you don't mash the buttons during that particular danger section, you do get crushed, and it's yet another in a long string of instant deaths in Dino Crisis. And these wonderful creatures here are known as Pherizinosaurus, which for you paleontology nerds out there means scythe hand. And from a gameplay perspective, they are representing the common enemies for much of the second half. Although we still get some raptors, and we do actually get some variation on the raptors coming up a little bit later. And I do find the Pherizinosaurus, I mean, from a gameplay point of view, they're basically just kind of upgrades to the raptors we've faced so far. You notice that when you shoot them with a shotgun, they don't get stunned nearly as harshly as the raptors do. And although if you keep firing with a shotgun, you can deal with them no problem. A big risk, as perhaps you might have noticed from that, is if you have to reload for whatever reason, you don't stun them long enough to be able to do that. They will get their claws on you. So they are a much bigger threat, and they do take a little bit more of a beating. So making our way back up here from the crane that we've gave away, that something dropped on us when they smashed the chains earlier, we come across another crane puzzle which has the same convoluted interface as the previous one, although I'm not going to talk too much about this just because I do feel like I'm just kind of rehashing what's already on the screen. So if you are struggling with it, just watch it, but it's pretty much just a case of getting to the dead researcher so you can get his DDK disc. What I'm actually much more interested in is the Pherizinosaurus, because they don't come back up in Dino Crisis 2. And I completed Dino Crisis 2 a lot. I never really completed the first one. Like, my step-granddad did, and I helped him with bits, but for me doing it myself, start to finish, never happened. And the Friesenosaurus, like, even as a kid, it just looked odd because of kind of like the crest head he has. And I know a lot of the representation of dinosaurs aren't particularly accurate. As we know nowadays, most dinosaurs did actually have feathers. And one thing I find always quite interesting is the fact the original Jurassic Park, you know, that really kickstarted a new wave of interest in paleontology. And the Velociraptor that they named after, they ended up coming across raptors very similar to that. The Utah raptor in particular is very similar to how the Velociraptor is portrayed. And so I know the representation of what they're called isn't always accurate in these kind of games or in those movies, for instance. I mean, we keep referring to the raptors in here as velociraptors when everyone knows velociraptors were actually not much bigger than a turkey. And a similar thing kind of emerges with the Friesenosaurus, but probably even to a greater extent. From the fossils we've managed to find of them, a complete male was probably about 9 to 10 meters tall. You know, which is significantly bigger than what we're facing here, which is kind of just like a beefier raptor size thing, which, you know, from the raptors in the movies and whatnot, they look to be maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. You know, they are big. And the Utah raptor, I think, was also about 9 to 10 feet, if memory serves. But the Friesenosaurus would have been halfway between your traditional raptor, the idea of a raptor, not the real, you know, Velociraptor, what you see in Jurassic Park, and a T-Rex. Like, they would have been massive. There would have been at least 2 Reginas stood on top of each other. So the fact that they're so much smaller, it strikes me as odd when there's a lot of different dinosaurs they could have done. And I think I talked about this in my my Jurassic Park Chaos Island thing. Like, the Dilophosaurus were always seen as quite small because in the movie we are expected to assume that they were a juvenile. The Friesenosaurus, not only would it be a lot bigger, but most of the evidence we see says they weren't even carnivores. So the fact that they're acting like raptors is so bizarre. Like, the reason they had these elongated hands was actually to help them to swipe at vegetation, to swipe at vegetables. They would have been too fragile to use as weapons. I mean, maybe as intimidation stuff, but yeah, I just find them fascinating because they're presented as basically beefier raptors, but they wouldn't have eaten meat. They wouldn't have been carnivorous. They probably wouldn't have predated unless they were just, you know, being assholes. Because, you know, I've seen a lot of videos of kangaroos just beating people up because they're dicks, but they wouldn't have tried to eat you. And, you know, I understand you have to take some creative liberties. You know, you want to have a little bit of dino variety to spice things up. But again, when you come across an upgraded raptor later on, the blue raptors, which also make a return in Dino Crisis 2, it just makes me wonder, like, there isn't much of an explanation of why these other raptors are faster and stronger and just better in every way. They just are for gameplay reasons, and because of that we can suspend our disbelief. You know, maybe it's just they were alphas or pack hunters or something like that. And the only reason I can think of why you would even include these when they are such a bad representation of what they actually were was specifically that they saw how they were described as having scythe hands, and a lot of the times you'll be fighting them in these very narrow corridors, especially with the minigame you unlock after completing the game, Operation Wipeout. There's, on Mission 3 in particular, you go through a lot of these kind of areas, and I don't know if they were trying to basically show or to like tell the player, look, because they have the arms, you can't run past them in these tight corridors, otherwise they will grab you. And that is why I'm taking all of these out. The raptors earlier, you noticed a few areas you could run past them pretty easily. They weren't all that intelligent. These guys, I would not recommend trying to run past them. They tend to grab you, and it's very hard to do so without taking damage. Again, as I mentioned earlier, that's why you wanted to save up a lot of this ammunition, especially these poison darts. These guys do take a beating. They are dangerous, so a lot of the ammunition we've saved up until this point, if you have been frugal with everything, it's going to make this particular section so much easier for you. So there's a raptor up ahead. If we just compare and contrast what happens, wait for them to get close and whack them with the shotgun, and you just launch them off their feet. And, you know, admittedly, these raptors do still take quite a beating. The Freezenosauruses don't have a huge amount of additional health, but just how much stockier they are and their ability to shrug stuff off makes it so much more difficult to stun lock them into place. And that's really where a lot of the bigger threat is. They do kind of do more of a jog than a sprint, and I do believe that their top speed is a little bit less quick than the raptors. Again, unless I pulled up the actual game files, I wouldn't be able to quote that, but that's just from what it appears from looking at them. But it seems that raptors would be quicker to chasing you down, but at the same time you can also just slip past them because they have tank controlled turning circles, so you know, you give and you take. Since we are going to move the experimental generator outside today, we expect to see external staff within the test area. As a final reminder, if the overload occurs in this laboratory, it will mean the obliteration of the entire facility. If you don't want to be evaporated, guard the area with extreme caution today. The staff has been working double overtime recently. Dr. Kirk in particular has locked himself in his private quarters for nearly a week. Nobody has seen him. Take good care of the researchers and remember that the experiment's success depends upon their ability to think. Recently, the credibility gap of Dr. Kirk has been varied among the staff. Keep your eyes on the ID rewriting device here to prevent illicit use. There has been an instance of someone abusing the rewriting device on the first floor. Keep your eyes open.
Gale!
Yeah. Well, at least Kirk's running out of places to hide.
The kid pointed out the mistake in my calculations of the estimated value, the simulation of the stabilizer. I mean, it seems that I miscalculated the timing of the energy reaction at its critical point by 6 nanoseconds. I admitted that I made a mistake, but he has a serious attitude problem. He doesn't seem to understand we're all exhausted from having to work all day and night on a regular basis. Written by M. To M. Everyone feels the same way about Kirk as you do. It's time to let him know how we feel. I heard that you could create a lethal poison by mixing certain drugs together. They said you just have to mix the strongest anesthetic with something else. Well, that may be going a bit too far, I suppose. 2K, you are pathetic. Can't you see Dr. Kirk devotes himself to the experiment without a care of anything else? Blaming others for your mistakes only exemplifies your cowardice. I hold all of you responsible should the experiment go wrong thanks to your blundering. Maybe you should be the one watching your back in case someone should accidentally inject you with poison. These are the blue raptors. Clever girl. Yeah, they do seem to be, at least through the cutscenes, a bit sneakier and more intelligent. And as you can see when you shoot them, they kind of have a bit more resistance. Again, not quite as much as the Freezenosauruses. Sometimes you will knock them back, but a lot of times when you shoot them, they will just tank it and instead just kind of yelp and then continue their attack. It's kind of what I was mentioning earlier about why the Freezenosauruses are even included anyway, when you have the upgraded raptors that you could have just adjusted a few numbers and just make it so that they are chads who'd give no shits and shrug off shotgun shells like they're nothing. But of course, I probably do harp on a little bit too much about realism. No normal animal, if you shoot them with a shotgun, are going to still keep attacking you. Like, a lot of animals don't want to die, and it's why you can scare off bears by making themselves look big. If you shoot something, okay, you might not kill it, but it's probably not going to want to fuck with you anymore, because animals do have a sense of self-preservation, which seems to be missing in a lot of games and movies, I find. Those who attend the activation of the generator for the first time in tonight's experiment should remember the following procedures. To activate the generator, the following two devices have to be set in advance: the initializer and the stabilizer. The functions of the two devices are as follows. The initializer generates the necessary energy for the first reaction when activating the generator. The stabilizer, the third energy reaction, takes in the air and generates the energy in a chain reaction. This keeps the reaction under a certain level. You will find the models of the two parts in the case set at the center. If you have not seen them, be sure to check and see what they look like. If you split the numbers that you use when obtaining the core parts and add 0 to each of the split numbers, they will give the pass numbers you'll need when obtaining the other two protective parts. Be careful when handling the pass numbers of the core parts.
Regina, I fixed it. You can open the shutters now.
This is one of the few instances where you come across a Therizinosaurus that you can run past, although the game does immediately punish you for being a cheeky bastard, because it will actually just follow you through, and I'm assuming these are meant to be automatic doors, so it will just chase you down, and it was actually a little bit of a fright when this happened to me. One thing I should have mentioned earlier when you're fighting these, to reduce the chance that they're just going to shrug you off and so you actually do get the stun, try to attack them with the slug rounds for the shotgun rather than the buckshot. And yeah, playing this game was actually the first time I found out that you didn't just have buckshot, there was other types of ammunition you could fire with a shotgun. And the DDK we come here is thankfully actually a lot simpler than the ones we've had to deal with recently. So the password for this is just WATERWAY, and it's again just a nice simple one because you have a 2 and a 3 there, you just take out the B's and the C's. Nice and simple, none of these different mechanics that the previous two have had.
Regina, it looks like this door leads to the port. It'll take a while before I can pop this open.
You copy, Mike? I found the key to the port, but I got a lizard riding on my tail. I'm heading to the main elevator right now. I'll meet it at the ground level. Hurry!
Huh. Sounds like we're not the only ones having problems.
I'm glad you're amused. But if that guy gets eaten, we're going to have to retrieve the key from that dinosaur's stomach. You've got to save him.
Typical guy, making the woman do all the work while he sits at his computer. So this likes to employ something that I refer to with a old school gaming trope of be quick but not really, where the game will imply that you need to hurry up, that there's some kind of time limit, you need to get to him quickly before he gets eaten by a T-Rex. But if you know anything about game design, if there isn't a timer on the screen, chances are there's not an actual time limit you have to go through. It just tries to convince you and trick you that there is by playing lots of high-tempo dramatic music, which, is a similar technique that a lot of movies do, so can't fault it for that. So we're going to make our way back to the giant elevator we originally came down here from and see if we can find this gentleman before he becomes Dino Lunch. There is only one Therizinosaurus in the way between here and there, unless you only put a few of them to sleep early instead of killing them, in which case you might have to deal with them. And again, it's why I always say, if you can help it, kill them rather than put them to sleep, because you don't know when you're going to need to be backtracking. was actually one of the more like horror elements, and definitely one of the more horrifying aspects of this game. And I can't lie, I know sometimes I've mocked this game a little bit in this commentary, but as a kid, this bit freaked me the fuck out. Like, the idea that you're stuck in an enclosed room with a freaking T-Rex, what are you meant to do with that? And just the fact that you are completely at its mercy, from like the music that's playing to the screams that you hear. And yeah, okay, it's a little bit pixelated by today's standards, but just I often found with a lot of these older games, because they don't look so good, your imagination fills in a little bit of the gap. And it's why Resident Evil 2, the original, freaks me out more than anything to this day, because of the way the zombies move are just so uncanny valley. The idea of, yeah, just being eviscerated by this unstoppable force. And let's make no mistake, the way the T-Rex has been presented throughout this game is similar to how Nemesis is presented in the third one, as just this unstoppable force you can't do anything against. And so the idea of being stuck inside of it as it just freaking eviscerates you, yeah, that scared the crap out of me as a kid. And, you know, I know there's no realistic situation where I'm going to be in a room with a T-Rex. You know, I wouldn't, if I even thought dinosaurs like that existed, I'd never leave my house. Like, I ain't going to get in, but that's just horrifying to think about. And when we move into the room, I mean, I think it's the closing shot when we see the door close, and a lot of the elevator floor has the big red sigil, so from a distance it looks like there's just blood and viscera and guts everywhere. In reality, when we actually do go in to look at it, it's not nearly as grim. But as a kid, because the T-Rex is just knocked out at this point, I had I couldn't progress at this point. I had to hand it back to my granddad. It's like, no, I'm not dealing with this, because I'm just like, you're gonna walk in there, the T-Rex is gonna wake up, and you're dead. You're just dead. Obviously, as a however many years old kid, probably way too young to be playing something like this, I didn't understand like the concept of game design, that they're not just gonna screw you over like that. You have to have some semblance of it being fair. But you know, as a kid, and as someone who hasn't played games much, you don't think that. You just think, oh wow, that's gonna fucking kill me. As an adult, I actually get a little bit annoyed at this section, because I'm like, a T-Rex is big, it's horrifying, but it isn't an invincible force of nature. It is not bulletproof. And the fact that it's unconscious right now is the perfect time to actually deal some damage to it. If you go up to it, I mean, you'll see that it's still breathing, and even if there's a chance it's going to wake up, why would you mess with that? Like, put a slug round in your shotgun and blow both its eyes out. Even if you were to go by the idea, or in the game's logic, which we've been presented with, that bullets just will not harm this thing, it's too big, you can at least blind it. You know, okay, maybe you don't want to climb into its mouth and start like cutting its mouth from the inside, or blowing chunks out from the inside or whatever. Which, I mean, let's face it, the T-Rex is real. You have elephant guns to take out elephants. Even a standard shotgun's going to do some gnarly damage.
Think fast.
Yes! What is that?
I saw something like this in Kirk's personal lab. This could be a problem.
This vortex must be the side effect of the third energy experiment. So how are we supposed to get around this thing?
Either we find a way, or we both end up as Dino droppings.
Not funny. Okay, I'll pull up any relevant data on the computer. Regina, you search around for any possible clues or leads.
Although it never explicitly states it, it is strongly hinted at that these weird kind of distortion rifts are the reason for the dinosaurs being created. Although it can be a little bit difficult to ascertain that. I mean, from that cutscene, you threw something in it and I was never certain if it's being destroyed or distorted or if it's like a wormhole that's transporting it somewhere. And I think from the sci-fi storytelling perspective, the idea is, in order to create infinite energy, which as a concept is impossible, energy is neither created nor destroyed, it's just converted from one source to another, you have to break the rules of reality. And I suppose that's where like the idea of there being a time traveling aspect to it comes from. And again, I suppose from a storytelling perspective, it's best if you don't delve too deeply into that, because horror works best, especially horror, other things as well, but a lot of the time the suspension of disbelief is best used when you don't explain too much. I know the movie Us recently as a horror movie, that's why I didn't like it, because it explained too much and then just like hang on and you start picking away at the plot holes. So time creates energy, created dinosaurs, we'll leave it at that. The DDK we come to here is quite similar to the one we found in Dr. Kirk's lab originally. So we see these numbers and you basically want to get rid of everything going vertically up them as if it was a grid. And that will give you the spelling of stabilizer. That is the Americanized spelling of stabilizer, not the correct way of spelling it.
Initiating decontamination procedure. Sterilization is effective while in facility.
I must confess, I never really understood what the point of that little cutscene was. I'm not even entirely certain what he says. I've tried listening to it so many times. Something not allowed in the facility, but that's about all I can pick up on, and doesn't really serve any purpose. You don't get that cutscene again. It doesn't really say or do anything. It's just kind of bizarre that it exists at all, to be honest. I guess it's just meant to be a way to show this is a futuristic facility, and so they have different means of having kind of decontamination processes, but outside of that, I mean, we already know it's a futuristic facility. We've already seen evidence of that, so it's a strange style choice. Anyway, we're not going to mess around with the Velociraptor you can hear munching off screen there. Just run in there. Now, I do wish that it was as simple as just having some light go around you and you don't have to wear hazmat suits or anything. I worked in a COVID lab for a bit, and there was one day where the heaters broke. And because we were in a COVID lab, like, you have to wear like so many layers. You have to wear like multiple gloves, you have to wear aprons, you have to be completely you're almost like a scuba diver to a certain extent. And the friggin' the heater broke and it was sweltering, and it was a 24-hour lab, so we couldn't get in to fix it. We had to keep doing our job. We were doing like 50,000 samples a day or something, so we couldn't just stop. And it got so hot that I ended up going to the side, and there was like a box of dry ice that we'd had from a previous shipment, and I like put it in the pockets of my lab coat to try and cool off. And then my supervisor was like, "Why are your nipples frozen?" It's like, desperate times call for desperate measures. Anyways, we're going to make our way back in here, and we have another puzzle very reminiscent of the one we came across earlier at the mainframe room. So just to waste your time a little bit, they're going to get you to put the individual keys in, both left and right, and the code for this is 0392. And much like with a lot of the other puzzles, it's the similar concept that you've already come across before, but just kind of ramped up a little bit. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of some of those puzzles you saw from the Lawnmower Man, although I'm fairly certain that's just my brain remembering like the game of it, which had like these weird stuff. And well, I haven't played that game since I was a wee snapper, so my memory's probably not all that similar. So I always found this a little bit confusing, especially like the kind of key that it gives you, because I didn't clock on that what it's basically saying is on the left hand side you want all of the segments which don't have anything in them, so like the empty ones, and then the right hand side you want 4 blue on the top and 4 red on the bottom. And what you notice on the left hand side, which again is something I didn't fully grasp, was that there are 2 ways of doing it, where you can either rearrange it from one or you kind of swap it round. So the way to do this is to make sure that you have all of the non-colored ones on the left hand side, all the colored ones on the right, and then you just focus on the right hand one and just make sure you put them in the correct order. As you can see here, it's actually not too difficult once you get the hang of it. It just requires a little bit of fidgeting, but yeah, it's relatively simple. And I don't think that is randomized each time. I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain that puzzle is the same regardless. So if you are struggling, just come away from it, it should reset, and then just like follow that step by step to make sure that you get it right. And with that puzzle done, we can make our way to the third energy facility proper, so an area I wasn't able to get to before. And this is another DDK puzzle, although I find it to be a bit of a step back. It's actually one of the easier ones to solve. So you have all of these numbers in 2 columns with a GF at the bottom, and what you're meant to figure out is that these are, each one of these 2 numbers, 2 digits refer to a single one, hence 04 to make it easy for you. So 04 would be D, 15 would be O, and this is meant to spell out Dr. Kirk, whereas pretty much everything, in fact I'm fairly certain every DDK we've come across previously was only ever 1 through 9, so I guess that's where the challenge is meant to come from, but I always found that one quite easy. And Dr. Kirk, nice, and they like to make the passwords easily guessable, don't they? But I can't even complain. Like, I used to think when I was a kid, oh my god, this is so unrealistic, until I actually started working for companies where the amount of times the password will be the name of the company, it will be admin, or it will be guest, which I'm fairly certain came up in one of the Resident Evils. Or what we had, there was a machine called an apricot machine, which was something that was used to put wash solution into these 96 well plates, which then went on to this thing which washed it. Blah, blah, blah. Not interesting. But because the people who ran the lab were so professional, the password was 420-420, because it had to be 6 digits, so we couldn't just go with 420, and apparently going 69, 420, 69 would be too immature, but 420, 420, that's just good enough.
Rick, I've located the main generator of the third energy.
Great. See if you can activate it.
Coming into the third energy reactor room, I find that the game kind of shifts a little bit back into something that's a little bit more of a slow burn, a little bit more tension building, a little bit more atmospheric. And it's kind of strange that they would revert back to this so late into the third act, considering what we've already come across and faced. It makes me kind of wonder if part of this was perhaps from an earlier design and they had to like change it around a little bit, or maybe it was just an idea that they, thought, hasn't been spooky enough recently, so we need to remind ourselves that we are a survival horror game and make sure we really emphasize that horror going into the final aspects. So this area, there's going to be a lot of puzzle solving, a lot of moving around, and actually a couple of situations you come across that, as I say, are very much more of a slow burn and very emphasized, or places a greater emphasis, it's correct pronunciation, on building up that tension a little bit more. Since I was assigned to this department, all I've done is sample the simulation data of the generator. Even a college student could handle these tasks. Why doesn't Kirk want us to operate the generator? Doesn't he trust our ability and skill? Written by O. To O. I don't think the problem is so simple. Because his ID card is required to operate the generator, once an accident occurs, Kirk is the only person who can stop it. I don't see what the military is planning to do with this conniving, nonsensical procedure. Written by N. I have an idea. It's about that guy Tom, who was recently assigned to the B1 area. He often comes to me to ask about our job. I guess he can't resist my charming personality. Why don't we invite him into our group and have him spy on Dr. Kirk? This should work, as he is good at gaining the confidence of other people. Written by B. To B. Don't be so simple-minded. Have you already forgotten how you'd been trying to get Kirk's attention until recently? Learn to think a bit more logically first. At any rate, the male researchers here don't seem to know much of anything beyond research. Maybe you ought to try showing the next one you become close friends with the wonders of shampoo and the washing machine. Written by C. Good to see that Regina has a healthy dose of empathy and humanity in her. Ah, she's dying. Gonna try and administer first aid? No, it's a waste of resources. So for this puzzle, I want to take the first one, rotate it anti-clockwise once, take the right one, put it in as it is, and then take the left one, rotate it anti-clockwise once again, and wabah! Circuit restored, nice and easy puzzle. Kirk has been hiding everything from the researchers recently. In a demonstration of solidarity, the B1 lab area staff have decided to investigate what Kirk and the military personnel are up to. As a start, we managed to set a wiretapping device at the parts storage area where they've been holding meetings. The device is sound activated and records automatically. It can also play back the recordings. It may be the best way to come up with some clues. We need Kirk's ID card to check the generator. We already know his registration number. It is 31 Generator Instruction Manual. How to activate and control the generator. 1. Prepare to activate the generator by operating the main panel on the upper floor of the control room. 2. Move to the B3 area of the generator to set an initializer. 3. Operate the panel near the initializer to connect the inhale shaft to the generator. 4. Move to the B2 area to set a stabilizer. 5. Activate the generator. 6. Go back to the control room and adjust the output on the lower floor. When activating the generator, make sure the doctor is present. To avoid accidents, the generator cannot be activated without Dr. Kirk's ID card. Now, one thing I find quite amusing about this is that Regina turns around and she's heard a gunshot. So it's like, go to investigate, what could that be? So you go back into the room with the female scientist from before and compare that to what we heard before. There's been a huge fucking struggle here. It looks like she's been attacked by a raptor. It looks like she's been friggin' eviscerated. But we heard a single gunshot. 1281, just in case you didn't catch that, but that's the code we're going to be using in a second. But yeah, the crime scene does not match with what the explanation is, and I get Regina is not a forensics expert, she's not a blood splatter analyst like Dexter is, but come the fuck on, there was clearly a struggle there that lasted some time with multiple stabbings. I get the impression that that was maybe like a reused asset, and originally she was meant to have been like killed by a raptor or, you know, mauled to death or something, and they ended up just changing it slightly, I guess, to kind of make it seem like you're on Dr. Kirk's trail, as opposed to he's just someone who's running in the background doing weird shit, wanting to feel like you're actually making a bit of progress, but I don't know, weird design decision. Now that code is going to be used to get us some shotgun parts, and in hindsight this is something I definitely could have done better. So the whole point that you hear that gunshot is if you carry on moving, you will then see Dr. Kirk run past, and then you follow him into his room, and that's where you get the cutscene. And for some strange reason, when I was playing this, I had in my head, as soon as I got this code, right, you need a key item, and so I leg it over here, completely forgetting that it's not a key item, but in my smooth little lizard brain, I had it pegged to something important. And Basically, I just make this walkthrough take a little bit longer than it needed to. I could have just carried on, chased Dr. Kirk down, and then come here afterwards. But, my walkthroughs aren't great. I do practice a lot to try and get them right, but yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah, I do wonder if there is at least some kind of mod that would change the decal of that woman being eviscerated. There's actually, if you are interested talking about how I'm not fantastic, there's a YouTuber called Soups. I think I've pronounced that correctly. I'm pretty certain if you just type in like Resident Evil 1.5, he'll probably be like one of the first ones that comes up. And he does lots of mods of the older Resident Evil games, and he's like insane. He'll play through all three back to back, like full long plays kind of thing. So if you're into watching these kind of things, that might be the kind of content you're interested in, because he's better at these games than me by a long shot. One thing I find quite interesting is there is a surprisingly large amount of mods for older games that I was just completely unaware of. Some of like the Resident Evil mods, I mean, I know they were always quite popular, but man, people, I mean, I knew that, like, for instance, the original Doom had a massive modding community, but I didn't realize that it still existed in the same extent. And from what I can see, there isn't really much in the way for mods for Dino Crisis. Well, 1 or 2, but especially 1. Like I said, it's one of those that seems to have very much kind of been forgotten on the wayside of survival horror games, just completely being swallowed up by its more famous cousin in Resident Evil. I think Dino Crisis 3 has a big part to play for that. In fact, most of the aspects that people remember about this is just Regina, just because her design is quite cool. More than anything, and people like to cosplay as her. You know what it is. Every time there's a girl with fancy color hair, or like something that's wacky and dyed, it happens. It seems like kind of a shame that there isn't really much out there, especially for Dino Crisis 2, which seems to have a lot of potential. But I'm not talented enough nor skilled enough to make those kind of mods. So if someone's out there wants to do that, that'd be awesome.
Don't move.
And what do you think you're doing?
Carving a name for myself in history with the ultimate energy source.
Open your eyes, you freak. Your precious creation is nothing more than another weapon to be misused.
You seem to have a small degree of superficial intelligence. It's too bad that it is wasted on one who is about to die.
Rick, our target has been secured. Report here immediately. Sorry to interrupt your lecture, Doc. You were saying?
Yes, I was saying. I discovered how the third energy could affect space if it ran unchecked 3 years ago. I thought that the energy had the ability to transfer selective space to an alternate time-space continuum. But I was incorrect. The space was not transferred, it was exchanged. To put it in terms that even you can understand, third energy has the ability to replace a pocket in space with one from a different time.
What?
Yes. I came to these conclusions following this evening's final experiment. You've seen the effects yourself. Those beasts were occupying the space this facility is located on almost 65 million years ago.
Right. So that's how those dinosaurs appeared in our time.
Precisely. And that is what I have done.
Uh-huh. And how many people were sacrificed before you made this discovery?
Who cares? The numbers are quite irrelevant. Let's just say that there were many. Extraordinary deaths for ordinary men, don't you think?
Spoken like a true devil.
A god or a devil? I don't care about that. Only my experiment.
Enough. Only one thing matters at this point. Your grand invention is blocking our escape.
You need to destroy the vortex. The only way to do that is to allow the generator's third energy levels to overload. Theoretically speaking, the third energy and the vortex will cancel each other out if they come in contact with one another. But there is one small catch. If you cannot stop the generator's third energy overload, this entire region may be shifted to another point in the space-time continuum.
Then we'll just make sure to be somewhere else when the shift happens. No problem.
But we couldn't even activate the device.
You're missing the initializer and stabilizer, right?
Where are they?
Calm down. They should be stored in one of the security level A rooms on floor B3.
Very good, Doc. Now you understand our situation. We live, you live.
Okay. I'm all set to whip up a program that will send a stream of third energy into the vortex.
I'll keep an eye on the doctor. Regina, you go find those devices and overload the third energy. Remember, they're in a security level A room on floor B3.
Hold up. That whole floor is crawling with dinosaurs, including that T-Rex. Let's get this situation under control before charging off. Here, take this. The disk contains the draft plans for the initializer and stabilizer. I stumbled over them while searching through the database. Fortunately, the room where the parts are stored is not far from here. We should gather up the parts and assemble the devices.
Don't be ridiculous. Regina doesn't have the technical knowledge for that. We don't even know if all the right parts are there. We'd be better off simply trying to hunt down the completed devices.
It's too dangerous down there. She won't make it.
It's your call then, Regina. You're the one who has to do this. So what's your choice? Okay, let's do it.
Whatever you do, don't drop your guard for a second.
So yeah, we're going to take Gale's strategy just because it's easier. And I do find it quite interesting when Dr. Kirk's talking. I think there's like a translation thing from Japan. Because I know in the original Resident Evil, they talk about Tyrant being the ultimate bioweapon. Like ultimate seems to be something that comes up quite a lot. What we want to do is take Dr. Kirk's fingerprints before we carry on. Otherwise, that's going to be a little bit awkward later if we don't have that information. And then pick up whatever goodies we have left and then carry on with the plan. Third Energy as the Final Weapon by Edward Kirk. If the third energy reaction exceeds the critical point, it evokes the overload phenomenon. When this happens, we can't control it. The huge amount of energy creates chain reactions and begins to disintegrate the surrounding air. The ensuing explosion will vaporize anything in the near vicinity. If we could control the area where the overload occurs, the third energy will literally become the ultimate weapon. The power of the weapon depends on how much energy we can restrain before the explosion occurs. In other words, the capability of the stabilizer is the key to everything. The third energy was supposed to be the project of the development policy. Create the basic power source for the permanently stationed weapon. If we change the policy of the project here and now, this government will be able to obtain the most deadly destructive device in the world. However, our current budget is completely out of the question. You'll find my estimate of the budget in the next chapter. Please review and consider. You know, completely aside, and I probably shouldn't give Dino Crisis too much harshness. I mean, I know Jurassic Park he did it, but also they had the same origin story, so it kind of makes sense there. But if what Dr. Kirk said is correct, and they're all from the same place, then you would expect all of the dinosaurs to be from the same time period. But whilst the majority of these are from the Cretaceous period, the Compsognathus, they're from Jurassic, not Cretaceous. Notice, preparing the stabilizer and the initializer. Make sure these two devices are ready in time for the experiment. Each of these two devices consists of the following 3 parts: core parts, protect part A, and protect part B. This means 6 parts are needed in all. These parts are separately stored in the experiment room, the design room, and the parts storage room. Once you have acquired all 6 parts, you can assemble them in the experiment room. A weightless manipulator must be operated by staff of level A class. So going back to what Dr. Kirk said about the dinosaurs being here where the facility was millions of years ago, I've been quite interested in plate tectonics recently, and just, you know, one of those weird YouTube rabbit holes you end up going down. And if you look at the map of the world, compare it now to the Cretaceous period to the Triassic period, you can see how like all of the different continents kind of like were originally one and then kind of like almost like split apart into like, it's almost like vortex is the best way I can think of describing it. And it just makes me think, when you say this spot, like the land, the point in space, because there was a great joke I saw once, which was space is littered with dead scientists who were smart enough to figure out time travel, but not smart enough to realize that the Earth is not in the same space, of like the same physical location after all that time. And that just makes you think, if it's in the same spot, you do realize that, you know, the continents were completely different back then. In fact, if it was the same spot on Earth in terms of like X and Y axis, it'd probably be in the middle of a fucking ocean now. But I'm reading into it too much. Although staying on the same line of thought of paleontology nerd rage, I mentioned before that the compies were from like mid-Jurassic. I think they were around like 150 million years ago, whereas like the Tyrannosaur was about 70 million. But also, most of the creatures in here are from vastly different areas. I mean, we know that the velociraptors we're seeing aren't actually velociraptors. They're much more likely to be Utah raptors. I believe the spelling is like as in the state of Utah, like UTAH, and I think that's because it was discovered by people in Utah at the time. Don't quote me on that. I remember watching one documentary. There was some paleontologist who I think was from Utah talking about them quite a bit. So, you know, I don't know if he discovered them or not, or whether he was just, you know, had quite a lot of interest in them. But Tyrannosaur, for instance, would have lived in what is now Western North America. In fact, I believe it was on an island continent known as Laramidia, I want to say. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. But, you know, they were from Laramidia. And the Pharazinosaurus, these things that we've just been shooting, not only would they have more likely had feathers and been a lot bigger than they're depicted now, but also they were from a completely different area. I think they were from like the Asian region, or what would now be considered Asia. I think it was the Nemegt formation they found them on. I'm fairly certain that's correct. I got really interested in kind of like fossil sites back when I was playing Jurassic Park Operation Genesis. Like the fact that one of them's called the Hells Creek Formation. Like, that's just metal as fuck. It's nice that occasionally scientists will, you know, have something that's a little bit cooler, and then they make a gene called Sonic the Hedgehog gene. But, you know, kind of everything. And yeah, no, the compies, as well as the fact that they are there would have been a greater period of time between compies and Tyrannosaur than there would be between Tyrannosaurs and us. But ignoring that fact, the compies would have been in a region that's now basically Europe. So T-Rex, Pherezanosaurus, and Compes. You got North America, Europe, Asia. Not quite certain how these all came from the same place, and from what I understand how they're describing the way third energy works, if it's just transferring it between a location that's already previously existed, then you'd expect that. If they just said, oh, it caused influences from like different regions, but I don't think they read that far into it. And, you know, you got to have a bit of dinosaur variety, but games teams were a lot smaller back then. I mean, even movies and TV shows now can't be bothered to do the research, so I shouldn't be too critical on them. Although that said, the Pteranodon, the flying ones that we saw earlier, actually probably would have existed around the same areas as the T-Rex. They would have been in North America at the time, and during the Cretaceous, so, you know, those two, if you're thinking of doing any kind of writing involving dinosaurs, those two totally fine to go together. The T-Rex and Triceratops also totally fine together. Stegosauruses, not so much. They're more of a Jurassic one, and they come around the same period as Allosaurus. Allosaurus and Stegosaurus were like depicted as great rivals, and then you have like the Triceratops and the T-Rex as great rivals. If you're writing, if you're interested in that sort of thing, it is a shame to know that all of these cool dinosaurs didn't exist at the same time. But that said, it's kind of funny because most of what we know, or what I guess pop culture shows us about dinosaurs, the ones we're most interested in usually come in the Cretaceous period. Again, the 5-star ones, the T-Rex, the Triceratops, etc., etc. There isn't actually much to do with the Triassic period, actually. And if you look into them, Triassic dinosaurs were fucking bizarre. Third energy basic concept. The technology to extract energy from the ions in the atmosphere. That is the heart of third energy. If you control the flow of ions by ionizing the constitution of the air, then you can extract the resultant electron movement as energy. The basic concept is simple. The electrons from which energy of the movement was extracted combines with ions to once again form the original constitution. However, due to the current level of technology, it's impossible to return it to 100% of the original constitution. The waste constituent yields a peroxide that is similar to ozone as a byproduct. However, it is not at a level high enough to threaten the concept of the proposed clean energy source. You know, if you look up like creatures from the Triassic period, that you'll come up like this just plethora of fucking weird ass alien looking designs. And the reason that they are like that is actually for kind of an interesting reason. So I think most people know like the mass extinction that happens like 65 million years ago when the meteor crashed. Interestingly, actually, the crater for that I think is just off the coast of Mexico, I want to say, somewhere between those two. But there's been many mass extinctions throughout history. I think the meteor one caused like 75% of all life on Earth to get wiped out. But prior to that, there was another one known as the Great Dying. I think that the specific name is the Permian Triassic Extinction Event, and they do that for all different ones. It's usually the first era beforehand, so like the Cretaceous period or something, and then whatever era afterwards, and they just put like double barrel those two eras and then say extinction event to describe it. So you had the one that killed the dinosaurs, which was caused by a meteor, but then the Great Dying, I think 75% is really high, but then the Great Dying, I think estimates is like 85 to 90%, and it ended up getting caused, I believe, again, I'm not a historian, but I do just have a passing interest in this kind of stuff, that there was a series of volcanic eruptions that changed the environment at the time and just wiped out so much stuff. And so when that happens, when you get that kind of bottleneck event, what you end up with is a situation where specialization isn't required. So you have very few species left, and then, you know, as time goes on, you want to diversify. If you want your population to boom, you need to focus on different areas. So I think most people at least have a passing idea of Charles Darwin, how he looked at different birds at the time, and the shape of the beaks was based on what type of food they went for. So after the Great Dying, because there was not much competition, because freaking everything was dead, animals didn't have to be specialized for the environment that they were in to be good and to survive and to prosper. And you get, I cannot remember the name of them now. In fact, let me just quickly look this up. Yeah, Tanistropheus, which I probably butchered the pronunciation of, and it almost looks like a proto-dinosaur. Like, it doesn't look real. Like, it looks like someone's created something in Spore. It's like a monster creation, and someone's just taken the limiters off and just went, let's make the neck really long. It looks like it would like collapse under the weight of it. I mean, I think it's like 20 foot long, and then its neck is like 10 foot of it. It's bizarre, and I know a lot of scientists, especially the further back you go, it's a little bit more difficult to get information. I mean, even from Cretaceous to Triassic, that's still another like 100 million years, give or take, depending on when in the Triassic period it was. And you get all of these really weird designs because you don't have to be specialized to what you're doing. It's a free market. You don't have to be the most specialized fisher. You don't have to specialize for going after one prey. And so yeah, Triassic is just full of bizarre designs that eventually, as the years went on and biodiversity increased, creatures had to become more specialized to specific areas in order to survive, and that's what then led on to the more traditional type of dinosaurs you see in like the Jurassic period. But it's just so kind of bizarre, and I wonder if ever there are like science fiction writers, if you go to like a different planet and they have to try and develop the ecosystem, I wonder if they've thought about that process and whether that would influence the type of creatures you would have. I just find that kind of interesting, you know. I don't read as much sci-fi as perhaps I should, but yeah, the idea of coming across shit that looks like it shouldn't exist and is bizarre, but someone's like gone through all of the effort of looking at like the terrain of the environment, looking at the kind of atmosphere conditions, and made something that makes sense in that context. I appreciate that. I'm not sure how many people do, but I think that'd be cool. I think that'd be cool. I should do that. I mean, saying that, I mean, a lot of novels of old time, I mean, not just of old times, even fantasy novels and sci-fi novels now can do that kind of writing. It's just they tend not to be the ones that are popular. I think there's a lot of really good novels out there, and if you don't already, I think audiobooks are a fantastic way to spend your time nowadays, especially if you're doing something like, you know, a little bit mundane, you're playing Minecraft or some other game that doesn't require all of your attention. It can be a really good way to read without having to read. I mean, only a small portion of people ever read for pleasure anyway, and I find now as I get older I just don't have the time for it. But that kind of effort into world building and storytelling, when someone goes that extra mile, I think even if you perhaps don't realize at first, even on a subconscious level, you understand and appreciate the amount of effort they're putting in. Like, if you look at, say, for instance, Frank Herbert's Dune, there was a lot of effort put into not only just fleshing out all of the houses and fleshing out the culture of the Fremen, but also of just like the ecosystem of the planet that they're living in. And I don't know, there seems to be this weird trend in movies and TV shows. I mean, TV shows recently, I think, have definitely been the ones that have lowered the bar most significantly as of late. For some strange reason, the quality of writing has just gotten worse and worse, and I don't know if that's a case of whenever there's a big project now, so much money is put into it that you want to have like a writer, a co-writer, an executive writer. You have so many writers that are trying to write a story based almost more on committee as opposed to telling a genuinely good story. And I think that a lot of the time that's why novels can do it better. It's just the world of a single person and their ideas, and so they know what they want to tell, whereas when you have TV shows, you're trying to appeal to what you believe will get you the most views, will get you the most people to watch, and that's not something, that's like lowest common denominator, and doesn't really work. I mean, I think there's kind of like a perception that the average quote-unquote normie won't notice, so what's the point? But I think the general knowledge and intelligence of people has been increasing, especially with like the internet coming around. And I know I, for one, when I'm watching a lot of historical stuff, when I see armor that's incorrect, when I see tactics that wouldn't work, like The Witcher. Going off a bit of tangent here, but Witcher Season 1 was a bit of a mixed bag, had good parts, had bad parts, but I just remember the very first battle scene where you have your commanders on the front line, you don't have any formation, you're just charging off, and yeah, okay, they might be thinking, oh, this looks really cool as a scene, it's really dramatic, but it just completely took me out of it. Just like, what the hell are they doing? Why are they facing a superior force out in the open? Why are they not using their defenses? And even in a world built with magic, it just doesn't make sense. And I know, I think if they created more dinosaur shows that were, I'm not saying necessarily educational, but at least put the effort into making them more authentic, making them show animal behavior, as it were. Like, T-Rexes wouldn't always just chase after you, same with any animals. You do get vicious animals out in the wild, but animals are concerned about their well-being. I know a lot of games and stuff try to say, oh, they've been souped up with drugs and whatnot, and that's why they're hyper-aggressive. It doesn't matter how big something is. If you shoot it with a shotgun, you're going to scare it off. I mean, imagine how big a polar bear is. But they're not just going to come out and attack you just because they're an apex predator in that region. If you have a gun and you wound it, it's not going to keep chasing after you, and the same applies to dinosaurs. I know it's a game, so you have to make it a little bit more gamey, but if you see that, like, it shot you and you're wounded, it's going to run off and lick its wounds. It's not going to fight to the death. It's going to go look for easier prey, because they're based on the same kind of mammal, well, not mammal, but animalistic instinct. It's not mammal, it's a reptile. But it's based on the same kind of animal instinct, and I don't know, I really wish we would have some more genuinely authentic dinosaur-based media. It's the roundabout way I'm getting to my point.
Danger. Third energy output is approaching critical point. Attempting to compensate.
Okay, Regina. Adjust the power output to maximum.
Here goes. Just remember there's no turning back once it overloads.
Then we won't look back. Crank that sucker and let's go out with a boom.
Generator has surpassed city ground. Third energy overload in progress. All personnel evacuate immediately. Repeat. All personnel evacuate immediately.
The ceiling! Move it!
What's the point in saving me? How pathetic.
I don't know what it is, but this music at the end here is just seared into my brain. I don't know why. Maybe it's like the slow build-up or something, but it's so B-movie. I remember when I would have been, what, like 13, maybe even younger, I've probably been like 12 or 11, writing this piece for my English class. And it was like very generic, bunch of soldiers go down into a lab filled with monsters kind of thing. You know, the kind of thing you make when I was a kid. I mean, it was 8 pages long. I got really high marks for it. But yeah, I remember it got read out to the people like 5 years older than me, and I got praised, and they told me it in class, and I went red as a beetroot.
Okay. Just get Kirk. Hurry.
Take it easy, Gale.
No. Take this. Tagged him with transmitter.
Gale. Gale.
All right. The overload levels are increasing. Just a little more. Looking good. Gale. What happened to him?
I don't know, but Kirk's gone.
I'm gonna kill him! This is it. All that's left is our escape. Let's go.
Wait, what about Kirk?
What about him? It's a miracle we're still alive at this point. Forget about him.
Don't forget the mission. You're not here to babysit.
Sorry, but I have a conscience. I'm taking you back, now.
No. You two get going. I'm going after Kirk.
What? You're insane! Don't you remember our situation? The third energy can't be controlled anymore. Staying here any longer is suicide!
I know. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, you two make your escape without me.
Hey! Do something!
Gale!
Thanks. That G.I. Joe deserved it. Come on.
So for someone who's been portrayed as mostly a one-dimensional character, I do really like the fact that Gale, you know, he's committed to his mission and so he'll go and do it no matter what. But he doesn't order Regina or Rick to follow him. He just says, if I'm not back, you guys go on. And I like there's a little bit of softening of Gale here towards the end. So you're presented with two choices. Rick says, let's GTFO, this mission is FUBAR, why are we sticking around? And Gale who's like, well, if we've gone through all of this, why the hell are we just going to abandon it now when we have a chance? And as you saw right at the end there, when Gale was crushed, he managed to throw like a tracking device on the Doctor, which is how we know where we are. So there's two endings you can do. You can follow Gale's plan, or you can follow Rick's plan. Alternatively, there's a secret and what could arguably be said as the true ending, which is what we've done, which we've said, Rick, look, we're going to get off, but instead we're going to follow Gale's plan. And I'm fairly certain this works either way round, so you can say that you're going to go after the Doctor instead, say you're going after Gale's plan and then follow Rick's one, and it both work out. But I just thought this one was a little bit more dramatic, so I prefer this one. So what we're going to do, we said we're going to follow Rick's plan, so Rick's taking Gale to the helipad, and instead of following after him, we're going after the Doctor, because, you know, we still take our mission seriously. We haven't gone through all this crap. Like I said, at the risk of being a bit of a fence setter, I see where both of them are coming from. Although, if possible, considering the amount of research that, like I said, I put myself in this situation. This third energy could be used to create devastating weaponry. You don't know where he's going to go. You don't know who else is going to develop that kind of technology from. What are you going to give the research for? You could make the argument that, do you really want it in the hands of the US? Because they haven't really been known to treat it well recently at all, ever. But if you, from their point of view, you don't want it falling into someone else's hands like terrorists, so I can make sense of it. So we're going to go track down the Doctor and confront him for all of the bullshit he's been pulling up to this point.
Regina, what are you doing? Answer me! What have you been doing? The hovercraft is being destroyed by the T-Rex.
I caught the Doctor, Rick. There's a chopper over here we can use to escape.
Oh, great. I'm heading over now.
Good. I'll pick you up ASAP. Hurry!
I really hope Regina's like at least handcuffed Dr. Kirk. I don't know where she'd be keeping handcuffs in her attire. At least like zip ties. Zip ties are surprisingly strong and they don't take up much space at all. I think that's why they tend to use zip ties rather than handcuffs nowadays. Especially in situations where like this, like cops obviously have to carry them, but you know, special forces wouldn't. I mentioned earlier that this can be quite difficult without using the grenade launcher, which I've not actually had an opportunity to show off until now. But this final section, doing this without a grenade launcher is pretty difficult, because as you can see with this kind of tram line, it moves along. And so this would be a great set piece for a T-Rex to chase you, wouldn't it? So of course that's exactly what's going to happen.
That T-Rex is right behind us. We gotta move fast.
Let's go! Rick, faster! Rick, now!
I do feel for this part they perhaps should have slowed down how fast the elevator moves, because you can see that the animation of the T-Rex does not quite match up to the size of the walls. It looks a little bit goofy. So equip the grenade launcher and just start plugging away at him, and it actually doesn't take that much with these to give up the chase, which is quite nice. There you go, that one done, and we are getting away.
That dinosaur just doesn't give up.
He's still after us!
I'm gonna flash fry that dino dodo.
And with that comes the end of our crisis with dinosaurs. Thank you so much if you have watched this all the way through to the end. This has actually been a complete nightmare to make. This, I don't know what it is, but creatively this commentary just, I was really struggling with. I don't think I played it all that much as a kid. I only played it recently to do the walkthrough, and as such I just kept trying to just come back and talk, and nothing was coming to mind. I know I went off quite a bit on tangents with paleontology, but I think perhaps that's probably more interesting than me trying to explain what I'm doing and why a lot of the times. I find Dino Crisis is in a weird place. It does have a little bit of a cult following, but coming back to play it, it's got some really amazing set pieces, and those are always the bits that stick out. I mean, even the thumbnail of this video is a really great set piece when you're running around the helicopter, but a lot of the interconnecting pieces don't really hold up as well. I don't think they hold up quite as well as Resident Evil does. Like, the first Resident Evil is a bit janky to get back into, but 2 and 3, even after all this time, there's so much atmosphere with it that it's just a joy to go back to. And I feel that Dino Crisis made the leap to 3D backgrounds from pre-rendered a little bit too early, and it really hurt its aesthetic, as well as just such an over-reliance on puzzles. And you know, puzzles are good in survival horror games, but a lot of the combat is very anemic, especially if you compare, for instance, this to Resident Evil 3, which had the combat rolls. It had a lot of depth to it. It's a bit of a shame, but you know, it's a classic for a reason. It holds a great place because of the characters, I think, mostly. And Dino Crisis 2 kicks off in a completely different route and is a game I've played a lot as a kid, so hopefully that one won't be quite so difficult to get through. Sorry, a bit of behind the scenes of making these things. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this, and I will leave you with the post-game credits. Until next time, take care.
You have mail. The final report of Operation Dr. Kirk. Agent name, Regina. Dr. Kirk. Status, recaptured.
We have recaptured Dr. Kirk, who is currently negotiating future experiments with the military high command.
Gale. Status, alive.
Gale did survive, but he is seriously injured and is currently recovering at our military medical facility.
Rick. Status, alive.
Rick is currently analyzing the data that was recovered from Ibis Island.
Regina. Status, alive.
As for myself, I'm ready to begin my next assignment.
Tom. Status, deceased.
Tom was attacked and killed by a giant reptile that was inhabiting the island. He will be missed.
Cooper. Status, unknown.
We lost contact with Cooper at the beginning of the mission and have not heard from him since then.
Mission complete. Operation instructions.